group of spirits who've been waiting for a little while since a few days ago. Wanted to talk to us about one of those subjects, so we'll start with them. I think it'll become plain in time as to who they are and what they talk about.
Hello.
G'day, how are you?
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Okay, well, we'll try not to be too formal.
Let me just adjust Mary a bit first. Yeah, just need to adjust it a bit. Sorry about that. Try not to be too formal.
My name is Dayan,
Yeah.
and I represent a large group. We are 100,000 gathered here,
Yeah.
waiting to speak with you
Yeah.
about the issue of reincarnation.
Yeah.
We have been waiting in the spirit life to reincarnate.
Yeah.
For myself, about 100 years, some of us less time, some of us a little more.
Yeah.
Waiting until we believed we would be called or drawn.
Given the opportunity.
Yes.
Yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, we've been listening to you now
Mm-hmm.
and feeling concerned that perhaps that won't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of feelings all of us are having about that.
Yeah. Do you know what feelings you're having about it, or are some of your feelings even sort of not well known to you?
I would say collectively uneasy. We feel uneasy.
Yeah.
Some of us a little more curious than others.
Yes.
I myself feel quite worried.
Yeah.
And I feel a sense of dread, but I don't understand why.
Right. And did you imbibe the belief that reincarnation while you're on Earth?
Yes.
Or is it something you were told later?
No, all of us have this belief on it.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you like to ask about it? So I basically fundamentally said it was false, didn't I? That it wasn't possible, and you've heard that. What would you like to ask about that?
Well, firstly, why? I suppose there's many questions.
Yeah, yeah.
If it is indeed false, which we're still not
certain about.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it such a widely held belief, and why were we taught it?
Well, there's a lot of reasons as to why reincarnation is a widely held belief. The majority of them are surrounding how spirits influence people on Earth in different ways. Now, I think since you've been in the spirit world, you've already been able to observe that people in the spirit world often influence people on Earth quite a lot.
Yes. Well, I don't know if we really understand that well either.
Right. Okay. Well, what happens a lot of times is the spirits who are in the spirit world often connect with people who are on Earth for lots of different reasons. Sometimes they're friends, and sometimes they want to continue their acquaintance, and other times the people on Earth have addictions that the spirits want to meet, and other times the people on Earth want to have an experience that's sort of outside of their normal experience, and spirits come along and help them have those other kinds of experiences.
So can we understand a little more then?
Yeah.
And perhaps we can relate a little bit of what we've been doing.
Yeah.
So we've been in what we call a state of waiting.
Yes.
And we know that there is a place here for us where we've all gathered.
Yes.
Congregated waiting.
Yes. And what are you waiting for? You say reincarnation, but there's specific things you've been taught to wait for.
really.
Right.
Just that it would be sort of indicated to us that it was time to...
Your turn to go,
yes.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there somebody who's doing that for you? Like somebody...
Well, it hasn't happened.
No, but is there somebody making the choice that it's your turn to go? Have you met anybody who's doing that?
No, but
No.
we are waiting for someone.
Okay. So you've been waiting for someone to come along and say, right, now it's your turn to go.
Mm-hmm.
But you've never met that person who you're waiting for?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No, we're still waiting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are sort of aware of some people seeming to reincarnate.
Yes, so maybe you can describe that.
Well, that's... well, we see people drawn suddenly from where we are
Yeah.
to the earth.
Yeah.
And they seem to be with a new life.
Yeah.
And we thought that was... I mean, we haven't observed it closely because we're waiting.
So you haven't sort of followed them to see what actually happened?
No, I guess we know we can sort of view the earth
Yes.
from here and view
Yeah.
things happening. And so we do see people...
Connecting to bodies?
Yes.
Yes.
Children, babies.
Yes.
And so we think that that's...
So when the baby was
happening.
born, or soon after the baby was born?
Yes.
And some spirits are going, connecting to that baby's body?
Yes.
That's what it appears to you
Yes.
to be?
That's what it seems to be.
Okay.
That's why we have many questions. So one of our questions is...
What's happening there?
Yes. And they don't seem to be told by somebody.
To go.
No.
That's right.
And our part of our belief system is that it should be indicated to us.
Yes.
To go.
Well, I'm glad that's a part of your belief system, actually, because if it wasn't, then you may have done what these other spirits have done, which would be even worse for you, actually.
Okay.
Right. So what these other spirits have done is that when a baby is first born, the baby is what's called in a condition of love that's in around about the 5th sphere condition of the spirit world. Now, you haven't learnt anything about the spirit world yet, but in the spirit world there are, you could call them areas that are separated by barriers, but the areas are different conditions of love. And the higher the condition of love, the more invisible the body becomes to you, unless that person shows their body to you. So surrounding you right at the moment, there are people who are in a higher condition of love than you, but you haven't been able to see them.
Are they going to tell us when?
Well, I will show... the reason why they haven't come to you is because you're expecting them to come to you to tell you when to go.
Yeah.
But that's not why they're there. They're there to try to help you with the false belief about reincarnation. And because you believe that reincarnation is true, these spirits can't yet appear to you. But now that we've started the conversation, I'm going to ask them to appear to you.
It feels quite scary, actually.
Yes? This is one reason why they haven't come to you up until now, because you would have been frightened. There's nothing to be frightened of. Just give you a bit of time to adjust.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you see that? Can you feel them as people? They seem kindly.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's nothing to be frightened of.
No.
Okay. They've been there all the time without you seeing them. And the reason why you couldn't see them is because their condition of love is higher than your condition of love. And as a result, that means their bodies, their spirit bodies, are less able to be seen by you unless they show themselves to you.
They don't seem as we would call higher being to be.
Yes, because you have a view of a higher being which is sort of like you feel they're special and to be honoured.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are not requesting that you honour them, are they?
No.
No, they're more like friends.
Yes.
Yes, and so if they had have appeared to you before, can you see you probably wouldn't have listened to them anyway, because they just would have appeared like a friend.
No.
to you.
Yes.
Right? But these spirits are from higher locations in the spirit world than where you exist. And if I can just get them for a moment to show some pictures of where they live, so that you get an idea of where they live.
Okay, yes. It's like a paradise.
It's like a paradise, yes. Which is not where you live, is it? Where you live doesn't seem to have much around you at all at this point.
No.
You're sort of collected in a group, waiting.
Yes.
And it doesn't appear to be anything around you hardly. But what they're going to do for a moment is they're just going to brighten up the area where you're living so you can see what's around you. Where are you living?
Well, it's just quite a interesting place.
Yeah.
Sort of not very nice, but not very...
Sort of bad either.
Well, it's not very nice.
Yeah. So you want to describe it a little?
Well, it's not that different to...
Where you lived on Earth?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sort of a bit grubby.
Yeah. When you say grubby, is there streets, is there homes, is there...
No, it's more like an open place,
Yes.
an open landscape.
Correct.
It's a bit dusty, and there's some rocks and
Yeah.
occasional
Plant, but it doesn't look green.
No.
So there's a sort
Very
of...
brown.
Yeah, brown landscape.
Yeah.
And quite dark. And if the spirits reduce their brightness back down again, can you see you can barely see your surroundings?
That's right.
Does that make sense? So that's where you live, and that's a measure of the condition of love and about how much you've learnt about love up to this point.
And we haven't seen it as somewhere where we live, it's just somewhere where we're waiting.
Correct. But it is where you're living because you're waiting.
Yes, I suppose. Our belief sort of says that this isn't really existence now we're in. We're just...
But it is existence because you have these other people coming to you. And I've shown you pictures of where they live.
Now we see
so
that,
now
yes.
you can see it is an existence, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
is it?
Well, you ask them as to whether there's an existence or not.
It's a little bit confusing for us, yeah.
So what are they saying to you?
Well, just that they do live in the place that they showed us.
Correct. Yeah. And because you've been waiting where you are, it's like you've been living there for such a long time now, waiting. Does that make sense? Just by the act of you waiting, you've been where you are.
But is this a place that we should engage living?
Well, it's not a place where you have to engage living forever. It's a place that is reserved for people who have false beliefs and are trying to do things that are in harmony with those false beliefs on Earth. And reincarnation is one of those false beliefs that affect people in this manner.
Yes. Yeah. We do understand that you're saying that it's not real, but it's very confusing on many levels because and we don't mean to be sort of silly in asking the question, but like when we came here, we knew that this state was a paused state.
Yes.
Before we start living again.
Well, you were taught that.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when I say should we engage living, I mean it seems very alien to us because we should live on Earth. That's where we should live.
Yes, and that's where
here is the in-between place where we wait.
And that's where the teaching of reincarnation began, with this whole idea that there's no place in the spirit world that's really nice to live in. So we want to go back to Earth to live on Earth instead.
So is that why we were taught this?
Well, you were taught it because a lot of the spirits who taught you these things, who eventually could give those teachings to people on Earth, were in the same location as you now find yourself to be. And they were looking for an opportunity to come back to Earth because Earth was a nicer place than where they realised they were living. Now, the second question you had was, what happened to all those people who did leave and seem to have reincarnated, connecting to babies' bodies?
Yes.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our spirit friends to explain that to you, because I'll explain it faster than I can. So what are they explaining to you?
It's like they're pushing on the people on Earth.
Correct.
That they're not actually having a new life.
That's right.
That they are pushing their old self, or their
current self, should we call it?
Yes, the self they've always had.
Always been, the self they've always been.
Onto the children.
Correct. And the reason why they're doing it is they can't see that there's a soul connected to that child already. Can you see that? They couldn't see that the spirit body of the child is high condition in love, and that meant that they couldn't see the spirit body of the newly born child. So they thought that the body of the child was empty. There was nobody connected to it. So they thought, well, I'll connect to it then.
And some of them didn't think about it.
No, because they wanted to reincarnate.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just wanted to be back on Earth.
Yes, and they're saying some of, yes, and we knew that too.
Yeah.
They got tired of waiting.
Tired of waiting for somebody to come along and tell them. Yeah.
So then that's not reincarnation?
No, that's what we would classify as spirit overcloaking or spirit influence.
So then why were we taught this? We understand that it's a lot of questions,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of, let us try and be very clear about what we need to know.
Okay.
So if reincarnation doesn't exist at all, you're saying it never ever happens?
Correct.
Then, well, there's still two questions.
Sure.
The first is, why were we taught such a false thing? And many, many, many millions of us were taught this.
Correct.
And then, if it's not true, then, so it's, what
is true?
Yes, and does this mean that we are here forever? Should we disintegrate? Should we stop waiting? Should we, this is very boring.
Yeah.
What should we do instead?
Yeah. Well, firstly, we need to say that what would be better for you is to progress to where these people who have come to visit you actually reside. That
So
would be better.
we don't understand that whole principle.
Correct. Because you've always been thinking back on Earth, back on Earth, back on Earth, you see.
Yes.
Rather
So
than
we don't
thinking,
understand the nature of where we are. I think that's a big question for many people.
Yeah, I understand. And I'll try to explain to you why you are where you are and how where you are mirrors the love that exists within you. Right? So the way the universe works is that every time you grow in love, you can also go to a new location. And that new location will always be better than the old one. So at the moment, you could say you've been in this same location for you, it's been about 100 years, hasn't it? Where you've just been waiting. And as you rightly say, it's very boring. But also, it's very, like it's putting you in chains, really. So it's like a prison almost of your own making, isn't it? Because you're not moving somewhere else or going somewhere else. It's just sitting there waiting. So there's no growth in that place. There's no changes happening. There's no benefit to it almost.
And also sometimes I feel quite frustrated because there are, and when I came here especially, there's still things happenings in my family.
That you're observing.
Yes.
Yes.
But I feel I can't be a part of it.
Participate.
Yes.
Because you're waiting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would like to.
Yes. Participate in what's going on.
Yes, or at least enter a new existence so that I can
have a life back there participating on Earth, yeah. Have an experience of some kind. Yeah, but you haven't been taught, have you, that there is experiences that are better than the earth life and also better than where you currently are. You've basically been taught that the only way to have a better existence is go back to earth.
Yes.
And have that.
And there has been some worry that perhaps we're going to go back to a worse. Maybe that's why we're waiting, or maybe it's because things are going to be much worse for us.
On earth.
Yes.
Yes.
Or that we have to have a lesser existence.
Yeah, some of you have believed that because you also believe in karma, and you also believe that, oh, if I did some bad things or wrong things in the last time I was on earth, then maybe it means that when I reincarnate, I'm going to be even in a worse place than I was the first time I was there. Yeah. And that, of course, has then caused you to feel a reticence about going back, which is understandable.
Yes.
So the net result then is that you've decided just to stay where you are, not understanding that you can progress in the spirit world. You don't have to come back to earth in order to progress. So you've been taught that you have to come back to earth in order to change or grow in your condition. And you've been waiting for some master of ceremonies, I suppose you could call him, to negotiate that pathway for you. But haven't realised that actually you can progress, and also that any progress you make is defined by how you choose to make it.
Okay.
Rather than somebody else. Does that make sense? Now, in the case of the people who came back and did the thing they did, which I would not recommend doing because it's actually harmful and causes more degradation to your spirit body. In the case of them, that when they went back and overcloaked these children, they became impatient with the process of waiting, obviously, which is very boring, and I can understand why they became impatient. But they also did not believe that there was a future progress to make in the spirit world either, and so they thought this was my only choice to go back. Even though it's not reincarnation, all it is overcloaking some babies on Earth. The other problem that it creates too is those babies on Earth are now not having the experience they could have had, because now they're being influenced by the people who were in the spirit world gone back to those bodies. So that makes the spirit get even into a darker condition, and eventually gets to a condition where they're so dark they can no longer connect to the body of the child, and then they have to go back to the spirit world where you currently are, but in an even darker place than where you currently are, a more uncomfortable place.
So we have questions about this as well.
Yep.
You call those people spirits.
Yes.
Is this what we are?
That is exactly what you are. When I call you a spirit, what I mean is you're a person, a human, but you now have no physical body, you have a spirit body. And you're actually one half of a person in a spirit body. And there's another half of you somewhere out there as well. So your soul is made up of one being splits into two halves at incarnation. So what happens is when you first incarnated, when somebody conceived a child on earth, at the first point of incarnation, your soul, your half of the soul, joined with the two bodies created. There was a physical body created and a spirit body that is of a similar genetic structure to the physical body. And what happened then was you had an experience on earth in those two bodies, but when the physical body died, the spirit body continued. And that's why I call you a spirit now, because you're in a spirit body now rather than a physical body. Does that make sense?
It does. Many of us hardly have a sense of having a body.
Yes, if you look down though, you can see you have feet and you have legs and yes? Yes, so you do have a body.
Okay.
You've hardly even thought to do that before, right? To examine your body. Yeah.
Or to engage with it in a way that one might
engage with it on earth.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
We thought it's a sort of
a temporary vessel waiting to come back. So the temporary vessel provided so you still recognise your own identity, and then when you come back to earth, then you lose that temporary vessel and get the real one, is what you were thinking. Yes. But that's not the case. This is the spirit body that was created and if you look down at it, and at the moment, many of you don't have mirrors, but what I'd like you to do is that one of these brighter spirits is going to bring you a mirror so you can look in the mirror. Can you see you even look similar to how you looked on Earth? Yeah? So you're still the same person.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're the same person as you were the very first time you came to Earth, which is the only time you're going to come to Earth, actually. You were the same person now, but you're in a spirit form rather than a physical one.
Okay, so then it's it's a little bit strange looking at ourselves. But
Yeah.
So then we should engage this
Life. It's a life.
body, right?
And a life, you know. And the more you learn about love, the more you'll be able to progress. And the reason why I've asked these spirits who have come to you to help you is because they can teach you about love so that you can progress to the point where they are. Does that make sense?
It does.
And it would be much better to be where they are than where you currently are. Because where you currently are, as you look out, you can see it's dark and desolate and you can hardly see things and everything's brown, there's not much greenery. You know, it's not very pleasant. But that's because of the condition of love. You see, one reason why you wear your eyes is because you've been stagnant in your development of love for over 100 years for you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So you haven't developed anything. No desires, no passions, no will have been developed to grow in love in any way over that time, and that's why you are where you are. If you choose to develop a will to grow in love and learn about love, then that will instantly place you in a better condition, and therefore a better location.
Thank you so much.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
So many of us very emotional now. The thought of
Being able to be in a better location. Yeah.
and to live again.
And to live again, yeah, rather than just wait. Yeah, it's terrible existence, just to wait, isn't it?
Thank you so much.
Yes, my pleasure. I suggest also that you consider that there's a God involved in this process, right? And to learn about that God.
Yes. That's another challenge for us
Yes.
to have.
Because on Earth you have sort of a belief that you're part of God, or that there is no real God. There's gods, but no single God. And again, a lot of false beliefs about God that have influenced your desire to progress.
And we've been listening to you speak about this. There's certainly no sense of a benevolent God or a God who
cares about you.
A personal God, really, like as in.
You're more thinking God is like energy.
No, many gods.
Yeah, many gods.
But not. It varies, but not with a sense of the personal interest in
you.
Yes,
yeah.
That's another challenge, perhaps, or something to confront.
Yeah, this is the difficulty when you hear a lot of false beliefs on Earth. When you pass into the spirit world, you're very tempted to continue them until something is proven wrong. And the problem is if you're waiting for things, then in the state of waiting, nothing gets proven wrong or right. You just wait, and eventually you get annoyed with the wait. And that's about all that gets proven, that it's a terrible, boring situation you're in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is where you've been. And this is one of the problems of believing reincarnation when a person's on Earth, is that when they arrive in the spirit world, they choose to do things they would not otherwise do because the belief has influenced them to do these things. Yeah? Whereas if you were taught something that was more truthful, which is when you arrive in the spirit world, you have a spirit body, and that person is still you, and you can choose to grow in love to new locations. Imagine how freeing. That feels freeing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Mary and I would be happy to answer any further questions you may have, but we feel that the spirits who have come to you now, see, they've been through your experience. If you ask them how long they waited,
It's a little more than us.
that's right. Some of them waited almost 1,000 years, right? Yeah. So that's a long time to wait.
Yeah.
And they got very bored, as you can imagine, waiting, still feeling or waiting for the universe to somehow send a message to them to get them to reincarnate. And so they've been through this terrible experience. They understand the feelings you're going to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they can help you with those feelings and help you progress to where you are as a result.
Yes. I would say a lot of us feel quite a bit of shock right now.
Yeah.
And
I understand that.
we would very much like to seek more answers,
Yeah.
perhaps from yourselves or from the others here.
Yeah. Whenever you desire an answer, they'll come to you and answer your questions.
Okay.
And also, there'll be times when, obviously, on Earth, Mary and I are doing other things too. Sometimes it can be hard to get instant response from us, but wherever we feel you're around, we'll try to answer your questions too. So you won't be without assistance. Does that make sense? All you need to do is call on the assistance and you'll receive some.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll just take some time now to...
It was a pleasure to meet you, Diane.
Yeah.
And say, and it's good that all of you as a group can now have some potential growth now, right? And have a life. That's wonderful.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to adjust to.
Yeah, and obviously there's going to be a bit of grief about how long you've waited and so forth to feel about as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many more questions, but
Yeah.
it seems just to absorb this one new reality at a time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again.
It's our pleasure. Okay. All right. Any questions you guys have? Let's start with you, Kimberly.
Why were they taught to believe in reincarnation?
When?
Why?
Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why the belief began on Earth. It was a lot about spirits who arrived in the spirit world and found themselves to be in a location that they couldn't see. So when you arrive in a dark place in the spirit world, due to condition, what happens is that there's no one around you showing a light on your environment. So it's not like here where you can go up to the wall and turn on a light and then see where you are. So imagine we were in this room, but it was completely dark outside and inside, and so you don't even really know where you are now, do you? There's no sense of the location anymore. And so they're going, well, here where we are feels like nothing. It feels like we're nowhere. So the very first spirits who began this belief started going, I want to be back on Earth, right? And as soon as they had a feeling that they wanted to be back on Earth and they remembered people in their environment on Earth, they felt drawn back on Earth and they stayed there, but connected to the body of another baby. Now other spirits who then observed all of this happening started creating a belief around that occurrence. So they started to create a belief that said, this is what you do. You get out of these dark places that you can't see, that are sort of like living in a nothing space. And the way you get out of those places is you have to wait there a while, like they were doing, waiting 100 years, he was waiting. You have to wait there a while, and then something happens where, and they didn't understand what happened, of course, which is all about desire actually, to not be there anymore. But when you get strong enough desire to not be there anymore and a desire to be back on Earth, then of course you're going to be drawn back on Earth, right? And so these spirits start observing this behaviour happening, but it's happening over hundreds of years, of course. And they observe the behaviour, so they then create a belief. And then what they do is they share that belief with people on Earth. And they do that by connecting through their mind and transmitting a whole heap of information. Very similar to what spirits with you do every day, transmitting information to you. And they transmit philosophy, spiritual philosophy, to the people on Earth. And the people on Earth eventually write it all down. And it becomes a religion. Right? And then that religion gets taught to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And in some societies it gets taught firstly to a family group, but that family group over thousands of years grows and grows into a nation. And so it's now getting taught to a nation of people, not just a family group anymore. And so this is the history of many religions on Earth. The Buddhist faith, the Muslim faith, the the Hindu faith and so forth, many other faiths too, have all begun this way. Even recently, the Mormon faith begun the same way, really. And so they're just different teachings that have been shared with people on earth. The people on earth eventually have written them down and then have created a religion, and then they've gone with that religion. People, they've influenced. Usually it started with family groups or family members and then grew over hundreds of years to be whole nations of people.
So the spirits didn't know how to progress from where they were at, so
No.
that's why they taught.
And they had no interest in progressing from where they're at either, because they wanted to be back on earth. So they come up with a way they could be back on earth. Make sense? Yeah. So go across to Maya and then we'll work our way.
So do a group of spirits choose a representative to speak for them?
Oftentimes, and sometimes when we get a group brought to us, our spirit friends organise them a bit to find a person who's the most directly spoken in the group. And sometimes there's a group of people and some of them don't feel very comfortable representing the rest of the group and so forth, and then there's others who are more outspoken and you could say more prone to be leaders. And so those particular persons are chosen by our spirit friends to talk to us first.
So does that necessarily mean that they're in a higher condition of love, or
No.
it's just, okay.
It's just that they have you could say almost a more stronger personality trait or an injury, depending on where they're at, as to wanting to be or okay with being a representative. Not everyone who comes is okay with it so much, but they are the best selection.
And Coral yesterday kind of regretted her choice to do it because she had so many emotions come up.
Correct.
That some of the others weren't having come up. And but she had sort of.
But in the end, she was the best choice.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
So does that mean that one individual or some of them immediately go to like a brighter place or a little bit better, or
Pretty much every one of that group has now gone to a brighter place. Not a lot brighter, but they're into a place where they can now see their environment, right? And now they're getting educated by some spirit friends, and they're very, of course, when you've been in a place like this for 100 years, in a place of stagnation, you're going to be, and you're shown that you can get out of it, you're going to be pretty passionate, right, about learning as much as you possibly can to get out of it. So they're like question, and feeling things as they go too, because as I encourage them to do, and the feelings come up naturally a lot of times, because you imagine you've been waiting for 100 years in a place, you haven't even known where you've been waiting. You've been waiting for someone to come along and sort of almost get you back to earth through a process, and you've been so obedient to that belief. But you imagine the emotions you're going to have realizing that it was false. There's a lot of emotions that you have, and these people are experiencing those emotions now, having that emotional process, but every new thing they're getting presented causes another set of emotions for them to feel as well, because they realize they've been holding on to a lot of false beliefs. But it wasn't their fault. They were taught these things, and they were taught almost to sit around and wait. And in fact, a lot of countries where there is a large population on earth, such as India and places like that, often people are taught they've got to wait for somebody in authority to come to them and do something and tell them what they're allowed to do.
There was various beliefs. We didn't go into it, but they were showing me and maybe some of our brothers and sisters who have a Hindu background can tell me, but also some of it was Buddhist, but some of them had very concrete ideas about that there would be almost like a particular
high being
who
had already progressed beyond reincarnating.
I don't know, but they were showing me all different things that they anticipated happening, and none of them were happening. Some of them thought that you should have a review guided by somebody, and then some of them thought that there was this special God, I guess, that was going to come. And
in Hindu faith, there is a God of reincarnation, isn't there?
Is there?
From memory?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it in this life, but and that there was going to be this special God who would then sort of usher them into the new existence, and none of those things were happening, and so they were
Yeah.
waiting, yeah.
And most of these spirits were on the earth before the separation of the
Yes.
Indian continent. So before Pakistan separated from India, and before that time. Yeah.
May I ask one more?
Yeah.
Sorry. Do people, do they have a hard time recognizing themselves when they look in the mirror, since they're...
Yeah, it's a bit tricky.
It depends on the, spirit.
Because sometimes they've had 100 years of stagnation. So sometimes they don't look like they looked when they passed. So if they passed quite young on Earth, they would have remembered their physical body looked quite like in the 30s, let's say. But if they passed when they're in their 30s, unfortunately their spirit body would look like 70 or 80, right, based on the belief systems and the condition of the soul. And so they see an older version of themselves, and it takes a bit to get used to that. Like, it's like you what's your age now, mate?
24.
24. It's like you at 24 being shown a mirror right now, tomorrow, and you look 80. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
How would that feel? It'd be pretty tricky,
Crazy.
wouldn't it? It'd be
Yeah.
like freaky.
Yeah.
What? Like, what? You know, like, and this is the response most of them had, because it was sort of like, it's pretty tricky. So the ones who died of old age, there's hardly any difference between the bodies, and so they are able to sort of accept it easily. But the ones who died of when they were young, it's going to be pretty tricky, because it's like they're seeing an older version of themselves in the mirror for the very first time, not realizing that that's how they actually have looked for the last 100 years.
Is that from age in the spirit world, from aging in the spirit world, or
No,
sinning?
it's been conditioned. Yeah.
Condition. Okay.
Soul conditioning.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. So over this side, if we start down at front, we'll work our way back. So on this side, just pass back. Yeah.
The children that are being overcloaked, is that caused by their parents' belief in reincarnation?
It's a combination of factors. It's the parents' beliefs in addition to the parents' addictions, in addition to what the child has absorbed from the parent has now become their addiction. So a lot of your emotions, most parents don't realise that a lot of your emotions are your addictions, and those addictions are felt by the child in the womb while it's developing. So often by the time the child is born, the addictions are now playing a part in the child's welfare. Does that make sense to you? So this is how the sins of the parent get passed down to the child, right? And unfortunately, as a result of that, the child now has some opening, although it's still in a high condition of love, you see. This is why they couldn't see the spirit body of the child. So the interesting thing that happens in all these cases is the spirit body of the child when it's born is generally in a 4th or 5th sphere condition, which is a fairly sublimated form of material that the spirit who's in the 1st sphere or in the hell condition, who's trying to reincarnate, can't see. So they're looking at the body going, it's a blank body, right? And then they're also drawn to that particular child for lots of reasons. One is that the child is on earth. And secondly, there's no protection afforded by the parents' beliefs. In fact, the parents' beliefs are supportive of the person in the spirit world now overcloaking this child. And because of that, there is no protections afforded to the child. So now the spirit can overcloak the child. Make sense? Unfortunately, it often means that child's personality and nature is now completely suppressed in preference to the will of the spirit who's overcloaked the child. And that then means that the child often remains quite undeveloped most of its life on earth. Right? And this is very, very damaging, as you can imagine, to the next generation of children. Right? On top of that, the spirit is going to take actions with the child's body as the child grows. And normally by the time the child, is walking, talking, they're walking, talking the spirit. The spirit is literally got so much connection with the child that the child is fundamentally saying all the things that the spirit is saying. Now, the average parent who has this happen with their child thinks it's wonderful. They go things like, oh, he's exactly like great grandfather. He's saying exactly the same things. This is proof of reincarnation. And they also do things like, wow, at 2 years of age, he knew things that the average adult on earth knows nothing about. And so the average person on earth is very, you could say, seduced by what's happening as well. So in the end, the parent is going, this is a wonderful thing, and they encourage it further. And particularly if the child has abilities that it instantly picks up, such as music or art or something like that, because a lot of these spirits, of course, were musicians or were artists or were some scientific knowledge and were mathematicians and whatever. And now all of a sudden the child at 3 is writing mathematical formulas or playing a musical instrument and without being taught. And the average parents go, wow, look at my child. Wow. Like, aren't I so fantastic having this child that's so amazing, you know what I mean? And a lot of parents get so seduced by what's going on, which is actually so damaging to their little child, but they're seduced by the happening, the occurrence of all of the things surrounding the event, that they don't consider that it's all wrong, it's all bad for the child.
And so at any point is the child able to recognize this when they're older, or?
It's difficult. As the child develops its will, then some children break away from the influence. But when I say some, a lot of times they're educated in the same manner as the parents have been educated, and if the parents have been educated in reincarnation or have observed all this, they probably are going to believe more in reincarnation as a result. And so now there's a heavier influence on the child to believe such things. So a lot of times that means they also become quite addicted to the show of it all. So, and when I say the show of it all, it's like a circus show in a way, where the parent is so happy that this is happening to the child, that the child gets addicted to the feelings it's receiving from the parent about being so happy about what's happened to them. Yeah. Right? And so then what happens is that the poor child is now addicted to having the feelings of being special and being wonderful. And my parents think I'm special and wonderful and so forth. And this causes a much stronger bond between it and the spirit. And quite often under those circumstances, they never experience anything different until they die.
And then when they die?
Then when they die, it's a major devastating shock. Right, because that spirit no longer can connect with them. And now they are the person they were created to be, but unfortunately completely undeveloped in will, in emotion, in feelings, in body sensation, in sensory sensations, everything. Like a baby in an adult's body not knowing anything about anything for the most part, except through the joined experience is the only thing they know. So it's a devastating process, and there's so much pain and suffering in the spirit world, with billions. This is billions of people. I'm saying go through this, not just a few. There's whole nations on earth who believe this, billions of people, and there's billions of people in the spirit world who are going through these devastating emotional processes once they pass, because of a single belief. Can't emphasize to you how devastating it is. Yeah.
While Mary was channeling, I got this feeling of, I guess, a rapport from some of the spirits, or one in particular, I don't know, of the hope of finding that answer, and I felt like a compassion from me and felt sad. What is that in relation to where they're at?
You mean you just felt their feelings? Is that what you're saying?
I guess maybe. I mean, I felt like a compassion, and I was happy for them, and that they found an answer. And
yeah, but why are you asking us about your personal emotional experience? Why not just have it?
Yeah. If someone came along and told you that story in front of you, you'd probably have a similar reaction, wouldn't you? Yeah. So do you just mean in terms of if they're in the spirit world and you're here and you can feel them, or what is the...
They're just people you can feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
in
so that's
comparison to
all.
the other one side.
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
yes,
yeah,
now,
I
well,
see.
that's a different question.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
Yeah. The other ones you had very little compassion for. The majority of you actually have very little compassion for. And as a result, there's very little connection with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think you had less compassion for the others?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, yeah. So there's something about this particular experience
Yeah.
of being in a no man's land for 100 of years or more
Not knowing the
that
truth.
appeals to your, can you see, appeals to your grief? Yeah. Because isn't that how you feel in a way?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the other spirits that we spoke to this weekend, they were coming from a place of, some of them were quite haughty at the beginning,
Some
weren't
are
they?
quite arrogant.
Some of them were quite sort of bossy a little bit,
Yeah.
and so they're not
As
they're-
appealing
and they're not as appealing.
to your injury.
Yeah, yeah. But they're still suffering because of sins that are with them.
And because of the false beliefs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's why we want to help them, no matter how they feel.
Yeah. And also, I think the group yesterday was a lot more about facing the consequence of your personal sin, the actions you've taken.
And most of you
And
don't want to do
most
that.
of you are like, make it a result of some belief someone else taught me, and so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you're more open-hearted to people like that than you are to people who are facing things that you're less.
That you're probably going to face
receptive
more
to.
of.
Yeah, yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense?
It's a good observation.
Yeah, good observation. Yeah. We're over here now. Okay.
Yeah, so, and who else had their hand up over here?
What
So
we'll do
go
is
back.
we'll sort of work our way back.
So ladies,
now,
if you
so-
stick side to side and then
Yeah.
just go back to the next person with their hand up.
With their hand up.
Yeah.
Two quick ones. One, does the spiritual body change in improving condition just like the environment does as you grow and rise in love?
Yes.
Okay. And then what about this concept of like knowing a child's soul before it comes in?
Yeah, completely false.
And is that like spirits
Yes.
coming down and like trying to find a way in?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Very dangerous actually to the child. Yeah.
It's quite tricky, and we've spoken to parents who are like, oh, I felt their name, I was given their name before they were
One of
born.
them.
Yeah, not good.
Not good. Someone
Not good.
is.
And can often mean the person's been overcloaked their entire life. So there's something to look out for
The
yourself.
parent or the child?
No, the child.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Certainly a spirit with an interest in your child,
Yeah.
trying to give them a name. So
Yeah.
something to be.
Yeah, sometimes it can be a familial spirit who's interested and just wants to give them a name. But that's rare. There's usually more interest than that, like personal interest in, I want this child to become like a mini-me, so that I can connect with the child and live my
Share-
unlived life
yes.
through the child.
Yes.
And, a lot of spirits pass in different condition and also different ages. Imagine you pass and you're in your early 20s. You'll feel like, I'm just starting my life. I've just got out of education. I've just got out of school. I'm just out of my mum and dad's home. I just fell in love just recently, and bang, you die. Like from a car accident or something. Imagine now you go, I've missed out on my whole life. Now, you'll be very tempted if you're not careful to go, let's go and find somebody else on earth that I can live a life through. Very tempting. And unfortunately, tempting because of the injury, the selfish injury, but still tempting. And many do it as a result. Yeah, not good. It always ends up in a distortion of the person's personal experience. Yeah. Okay, so Fernanda next year, but
So Diane had recounted seeing other spirits while she was waiting, and they had just disappeared back to Earth. And yesterday you had said that there had to be a spirit who would show those that are waiting the way back to Earth. So,
sorry, I'm not following your question.
Yeah,
Right.
so Dion, who's actually a man.
Dion is a man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not a woman.
Was.
Spelled D-A-D-J-J-A-N.
Yeah, DJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, how were those other spirits that Diane was seeing sort of
Coming
go
back.
back to Earth,
Yeah.
doing that if they hadn't been shown how to return to Earth?
Precisely.
Yeah, the way they did it was they got tired of waiting. And so they just got annoyed with waiting, and they started to exercise a desire of their own, rather than just, see, when you have no desire, you just sort of sit around waiting for things to happen to you. Many of you do this in your day-to-day life, like, you know, no desire, sit around waiting for something to happen to me. Now, because on Earth you've got to still go out to eat, but you know, you've got to go and get food, you've got to probably get some work because you need a place to live, you're going to be forced into experiences. But in the spirit world, you're not forced into experience if you decide you're not going to have one. So if you decide you're waiting. You're not having any other experience. And after a while it gets so boring, as you can imagine. Poor Diane, 100 years waiting. Not even seeing his surroundings. Waiting. He's just waiting. He sees things going on Earth. He sees life passing him by. He sees, you know, one generation of family passing. He can still see all that, but he's waiting still. So he's seeing everybody else live a life, and he's just waiting to live a life. Eventually you get so frustrated with that you feel you want to start living a life, and the only way known to you to do it that you can see is what other people have done, overcloaking children. So he would have been drawn sooner or later into overcloaking a child on Earth.
The question
Makes
is
sense?
about the method of transport back to the Earth, and
Well,
do you
it's-
have to be shown? You don't
No,
actually
as
have to
soon
be
as you
shown.
have the desire, you're there. As soon as the desire happens, you're there.
Some spirits are shown the way when they're more, they've like entered the spirit life and they're curious about returning to Earth. They might be shown a sort of
From some other spirit.
yes,
Yep.
but it's the pull of desire, especially when you haven't fully entered the spirit life, commonly just draws spirits back to the Earth without
Yeah.
having been shown.
Yeah, yeah. So you don't even know that you just went over a boundary, a boundary of space. You don't even observe that. The emotion in you is just going, I want to be there, so you end up being there. Yeah.
Okay, who else over here had their hand up?
Well, let's go down the front and then we'll work our way back. So.
Yep, and who over here had their hand up still? Yep, so go back.
In your website, there's a copy of 30 Years Among the Dead.
There is.
Where there is a doctor and a
Dr.
mystic
Whitline,
woman,
yes.
and then a tiny tingling sensation on the patient.
Correct,
And
an
then
electrical
checks the
impulse.
spirit body that is overcloaking the patient.
Correct.
Although me and my wife are not going to have a child now, but
Yeah.
if we were young, and I have suspicion that my child is overcloaked,
Yeah.
is that something that
You would
parents can
consider?
do?
Well, it's not the most loving thing to do. No.
It's not the
No.
most loving thing that's happened to my child. And
I
can't
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Both things are not very loving.
But that's not, the reason they did that was so that the spirit would leave the patient and
Go to the medium.
the wife could channel the spirit.
So
and
they didn't
so
just
that
do it
this-
to kick out the spirit. They did it to educate the spirit.
Yeah, and that would
Goal.
mean that the spirit had some chance of shifting in their overcloaking state of the person on Earth.
Yeah.
But in order for that to be permanent, there had to be a change in the spirit or the person on Earth, or both.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have to continually shock the person all the time.
Mm.
Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
when you're dealing
Which
with
some psychologists and psychiatrists do, by the way.
not continually, but
Not
yeah,
continually, but they do electroshock
Physically,
treatment
yeah.
of people,
Yeah.
and this is why electroshock treatment of people works sometimes, because it kicks out spirit influences.
I probably find more loving. in
There are
methods
much
that-
more loving ways of dealing with it.
Yeah, and the reason
The
I'm
shock.
really concerned about your question is because people need to really deal with the beliefs and the emotions that create attractions between them and their children,
Yeah.
between spirits and their children, and them and spirits.
That's
That's the only way to lovingly deal with the situation, and also to permanently deal with the situation.
can we say something else though? That as Mary just pointed out too, the goal of Dr. Carl Whitman and his wife was to educate the spirit and also educate the person on earth. You see, the average person who considers shocking their child to get the spirit out is not concerned about the spirit at all. They don't care about the spirit at all. They just want to kick him out, you know what I mean? So that's not very loving to any spirit, is it? Just to kick him out, and then he's left in no man's land, waiting to reincarnate still. So what is he going to do? He's just going to find another child, and maybe even your child again,
Yes.
you know, because he can. So at the end of the day, unless somebody gets educated in the process, it's really not going to be a beneficial process.
Okay, I have another example. People have heard of exorcism. Even the Catholic faith,
Yep.
Religion, has selected priests who
Perform
Yes.
exorcisms, yes.
to kick. Like obviously the patient is like kind of expressing devilish behavior, and that's what
Yes.
they'd like to eject out of that.
Correct, yes. So do you want to know what's happening there?
Well, I know what's happening, but
Well,
is
maybe
that
you
something
don't
that-
actually.
Huh?
Maybe you don't.
I know it's a bad spirit.
Well,
Overcloaking
well,
that.
it's worse than that.
Oh, okay.
It's worse than that. Unfortunately. There are many people who are Christians on earth, or in this case, Catholic. So let's say I'm a member of the Catholic faith on earth, and I pass. And I see, I look on earth and I go, look at that, the Catholic faith is losing its influence on earth. This is not good. My faith is the best faith, and it's losing influence on earth. What things can I do to encourage people on earth to see that my faith is true and real and actually works? So what they do is they overcloak a person on earth. So we call this person is sort of Jane on earth, right? Overcloak Jane and torment her and get her to do all sorts of what appear to be evil things. And then they encourage a priest who does not know oftentimes what's going on to come and perform an exorcism on Jane. And he does that by invoking my name, unfortunately, frequently, right? And doing all these things to Jane. He goes through a ritual with Jane, and this spirit stops tormenting her as soon as the ritual is complete. Stops.
They engineered that. It's a plot.
They engineer it. It's a scam.
It's a plot, yeah.
But-
I
but
like
it's-
what you said, a plot.
Whoa, it's a plot, it's a scam. But when I say it's a scam, it's a very dark scam. Because it's a scam to cause everybody who observes that happening to Jane to go, wow, our faith is the true faith. God, look, God healed her. The priest did his thing, or the minister did his thing. In the case of some newer religions, you know, like Pentecostal, you know, the special apostle person came along and did like that, and look at the power he has. He just has to go like that, and she was cured straight away. Isn't this proof that our faith is true? Our faith is wonderful, right? And all the people observing this, even people who are not even believers observing this, go, something happened there. So now they're more inclined to believe that it's true.
Yeah, one more question. Another example is in the Catholic religion.
Can I stop you with the next question? Do you all understand what's going on there?
Yeah.
Remember we described this back last week when we were in San Diego in the main town area. Remember there was that group of spirits who were guiding this guy we met on the plane. Remember him, for those of you who were there? This is what he was doing too, similar thing. This thing goes on in every religious faith on earth. Not just Christian faith, every religious faith has these dark spirits who pass. Now, not all people in that faith are dark, but there are some that are so dark that they are perfectly okay as spirits, feeling that a scam is the best way to get you to believe in their faith. And because most people on earth are basically totally facade oriented, right? Totally into the magic of it all, totally into the circus, the average person will accept it. So I need to say that to all of you because it's a big problem on earth. It's like a huge problem on earth. It happens everywhere we go, we see it happening. You know, and we meet people every day, people on the plane like we did every day, where this is happening too. And it's very sad. And it's also very dark. The motivation is very dark.
Yeah. When I was little, because I was brought in the Catholic faith,
Yep.
I would say the rosary because that's what the teaching I got from being brought in a Catholic school, and there's a religion class, and there are sisters that teach us.
That's right.
Pray the rosary.
That's right.
And when I was older, I researched this a lot.
Yeah.
And even the church has declared so-called apparitions. Okay.
That's right.
There's Fatima, St. Bernadette.
Correct.
Yeah, but there was a point wherein I suspect they have learned things from this, but because they must be getting hundreds of reports from different countries. Like the bishops are sending these reports to the Vatican.
Correct.
And they stop recognizing that it's from heaven or.
That's right, because they don't. There is a movement in the higher parts of the spirit world, in the celestial heavens,
Yes.
where our brothers and sisters there are going, let's try to educate some people that there are dangers in this.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's why the Vatican stopped recognizing. That's why the apparition in Medjugorje, they're not declaring it as a vision from.
That's
whatever.
right. So if it wasn't for the sake of those good spirits who are trying to say, no, this is bad, and we're going to try to show people on earth that actually this isn't as good as it appears, if it wasn't for them, many people on earth would still be doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the church stopped recognizing this, but
Now,
they.
No
is there a
more
question?
story there.
Yeah,
Sorry. No more need for any more.
Okay.
Let's pass it to your wife because she had a
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
No, I was wondering, there are 100,000 spirits.
Yeah.
Do all of them have the same level of love?
If you go up
I'm
closer,
sorry,
do all of them
do
have
all
this-
of them have the same level of love?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
is it? So that's my first question.
Yes, they do.
They do.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the same group. Yeah.
But what brings you to a certain location? It's the level of love? Is it the belief, or it's a combination?
Well, a combination, you see. It's sort of like, this is the trouble with beliefs, is because many of you sort of feel when we talk about level of love, many of you think, well, that's the level of love I have inside of me. But many of you don't realise that your belief also determines your level of love. So the unfortunate thing about beliefs is that you might have a certain condition of love. Like, so these guys actually were quite kind people actually. They wouldn't have normally have passed into their location with the exception of their false belief and their desire to get back to earth and harm people on earth, right?
Well, they didn't want to harm people, but they
They had a desire to go back to earth, not understanding the harm, and that's what caused them to arrive in the condition. Now, if we could help them in this case because they weren't adverse to having the conversation. But there are many millions of spirits, billions of spirits actually, in the same condition as this group that we can't even talk to yet.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering when you were channeling Mary. The spirits seem to be kind, but
They are,
Yes,
Mary
but-
was describing the location to be dark.
It is dark, yes.
Okay.
And it's dark because of them holding on to a belief that's out of harmony with love. Make sense? Yeah. So
So
they
the
were
darkness-
unable to accept the truth.
Yeah.
That would help them move from that place.
That's right. Yeah. Your location in the spirit life is the one that's best matched to your condition, which is
And desires.
which is a culmination of your beliefs and your desires and your emotions.
It is to write down what it is. So Mary's saying it's a combination of your condition.
Your
is-
condition is your beliefs.
So beliefs. very big part of your condition.
Yeah. Desires.
Desires, another big part of your condition.
And your emotions, which can include sinful emotions.
The sin that you've imbibed.
So these guys obviously hadn't dealt with any of their sin, so they did have a condition that didn't take them to a place of great lightness yet, because they hadn't dealt with anything that they had sin in them on earth as well. But they weren't aggressive or demanding people, but neither are you, and you've got sin. Neither am I. It depends on us, Jesus, if I'm demanding. Yeah. So these things create my condition, and the location that I go to in the spirit life, it matches that condition, not in a way to punish me, or it's just that I'm harmonious with that environment.
That's the most loving place for you to live while you have the condition you have.
Yeah. And because these guys, they had the belief in reincarnation, they had some sin from their life on earth, but also
some emotions they didn't want to feel.
Crucially, they didn't have a desire surrounding their beliefs yet. They had very set beliefs about sin, and they had very limited desire about like changing their belief. You know, they weren't curious, like, is my belief wrong? Is it right? Obviously, that was sparked through them listening to us over the last few days. So, and that's the start of what changed for them. That's why they came, and now they'll be in a lighter location.
Mm-hmm.
But there's many people in the spirit world who are in places of sort of greyness or darkness or nothing's very interesting. But that's because in their life on earth they haven't been very interested in anything. And it's not a punishment, it's just that's sort of a reflection of where you're at, you know.
The people who are not interested in anything, when you spend time with them, how do you find them? They're pretty boring, aren't they? It's sort of like everything's ho-hum and everything's just like, if you raise any subject, they're not interested in any real subject.
They're not doing anything with their lives. Yeah. Like, oh, what did you do? Oh, nothing.
Yeah, a lot of video gamers are like that, right? All they're interested in is video games, and that's basically it, nothing else. And so in the end, you can see that if you've got a primary interest in something that isn't available to you in the spirit world, and you've got no other interest, you're going to be pretty boring when you hit the spirit world, and therefore in a pretty dark condition in terms of your beliefs will determine to a large degree what you choose to then do. Yeah. So I'm a video gamer on earth. I die in my 30s. I like my video games. I'm addicted to them. They distract me from life. I'm not really living a life while I'm playing my video games. So I die. Who am I going to look for on earth? I'm going to look for a gamer, overcloak him, make him a really good gamer. And this happens, by the way. This is not a joke. This is like some guys who become like world famous gamers are totally overcloaked.
At least while they play the game.
While they're playing the games in particular. Yeah. Same goes with a Formula 1 driver or a sportsman of some kind, or oftentimes totally overcloaked by some spirits who that's how they wanted to live their life on earth, and they didn't get to, so they're overcloaking someone who has those abilities now. Yeah. Okay, we're over here somewhere. We were.
This is a question about the human soul as opposed to the, is that okay to ask?
Yeah.
The medium stuff? Okay. You said that there's, so you have your soul and then you have your two bodies, and they are connected through the silver cord to the spirit body, and then you said there was like a golden cord connecting to the soul.
Yep.
And I've also heard you say that there's like an energy transfer between the two halves of the soul that happened without them knowing.
Yep.
Is there a cord that connects your half of soul to the other half of your soul, like there are the cords for all this other, like the bodies and stuff?
Why would there be a cord when you're actually half?
Oh, I don't know, because I was just, because there's I've heard you talk about a lot of cords, like the Holy Spirit. Like a power cord that plugs you
cords
in.
Everywhere.
Cords are for appendages.
Okay.
But in the spirit world, it's not entire, like, in the spirit world, there is like a faint connection, again, depending on your condition and desire, or connecting you to your, this is not a cord.
No, I disagree with Mary completely.
Okay, so.
Yeah, what you're going to say. The reality is the two halves of the soul are joined to each other. They're not separated at all, right? But they are separated. So what I'm saying there is they're not separated in a. They exist in the soul space, in a dimension completely different from the spiritual dimension and the physical one. They are joined as a whole unit in that dimension permanently. Right?
Okay, and so the spirit bodies are just hanging out in their respective spheres, but the soul itself just stays in that location, and that's where it's at.
Well, no, the soul exists in that dimension.
Okay.
Of which there are gradients of love right from the hells, right the way through to what is way beyond the union state.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
But it's in a different dimension.
Yeah.
Now, so it's hard to describe these dimensional things to you when humans are not used to thinking of things in dimensions at all. We're used to seeing things and thinking of things in a very finite way. So this soul exists in the dimension that contains souls, and it's always there.
Okay.
It can't actually exist on Earth physically, aside from being in the dimension that takes up the same space as the Earth does.
Yeah, and only other souls who are unified can see that dimension at all in the first place, right?
Any soul
Like
that
a
is
third
unified
spirit.
and self-aware,
Yeah.
in other words, into the union state, can see them.
Yeah.
Any soul that is not aware can't see them. They are not even aware enough to even know they can see. That makes sense? So this soul, half of the soul, connected to the two bodies, these are connections, physical connections. The one is called we'll call it the golden cord, and one is called the silver cord, right? They're actual connections. In fact, the silver, it doesn't actually work like that, or what I have drawn of it really works like this. Right? Where the physical body is connected via the silver cord to the spirit body. And the spirit body is connected to the soul. That's really how it is. So when this body dies, that cord snaps, and now that body just becomes a thing that decays in the grave or fire or whatever. Now you've got the spirit body still connected. It's an appendage of the soul. And you can have many appendages of the soul. In fact, the soul, eventually you can learn how to create more appendages, right, of the soul, if you want to.
When you're in the union.
Even before then, you can create a physical body. So let's say you pass and you get to the third or fourth sphere, and you realise that you've learnt all the ways you can create a body, because it's done through scientific principles. You have to use scientific principles to create the body. But let's say you gather all the matter together and you can actually physically create a physical body on Earth. Right? That's an appendage to your soul still. You're using that body and that is a direct appendage. So when you first incarnate, you've got the two joined together here. Does that make sense? And then you've got these temporary appendages that are possible. Make sense? But only through your education. Yeah? Now, if you think about it from that perspective, you can see these are connections. These two halves of the soul, how I've drawn them is not really how it is. It's just one soul. One unit, which is expressed in two halves initially. And the only reason why there's an energy disconnect between the two is the lack of awareness and desire to connect. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like there's a disconnection, and that's why I draw it like that. But the reality is there's no disconnection. They are joined together, right? The two halves are joined together. But how you choose to experience your emotions as your half is going to have a huge impact upon whether you can feel the other half or not.
And you said that the in that soul dimension they have various conditions of love in which the souls live in. What if one half of your soul is like terrible in love and one's like really good in love? Does the soul have to be in the
Then you can
terrible
go
condition
between
place?
those two conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not consciously aware of yourself as a unified soul in
No.
that state anyway, so
That's right.
it's really kind of moot.
That's right.
Moot.
It's a moot point, really.
Okay.
Because you're not aware.
Yeah.
It's only when you become aware that you realise this is possible, but by the time you've done that, you join.
Yeah, you're great, good love.
That's right. So.
But I was referring to the spirit body's awareness of the spirit body connected to the other half of the soul.
Yeah, well, that's only going to be, isn't it? Whether it has a connection with each other, whether there's an awareness of each other. That's only possible.
So if a spirit in the spirit world has an awareness that I have another half somewhere, like they can potentially trace this like thing and find their
what happens is
that's what I was
what happens is there's this rose connection.
Okay, so
often at the beginning is very, very ethereal, in the sense that
which is dependent on the desires, isn't it?
Because it's dependent on the desire of the individuals in their feelings.
Yeah.
But initially it's usually not even existent, like because there's no feeling. But let's say I have a romantic feeling, and instead of having a romantic feeling towards the person I'm living with or whatever, I have a romantic feeling, I want to find my soulmate. I want to, that's what I want to develop. Well, that's the beginning, if it's a real feeling, that's the beginning of this sort of rose link between the two halves. And so if the person here follows that rose link, that's the fastest way to find the other half. Now, most spirits are not taught that until the fifth sphere anyway, right? And the reason why they're not, because many people who follow the other half, imagine if you did that and both of you in the hell, and you've got all of your injuries and addictions and all of your other stuff, and he's got all of his or her injuries and addictions and all of her other stuff, and you trace it back to the other person, and you try to spend some time with them, you're likely in your addictions going to really hurt each other. And you're more open to hurting your own soulmate than you are hurting to anybody else, because there's a connection that's much more stronger than anyone else. So this is why a lot of times spirits are not educated until they're at a point where they really can't hurt another person very easily. You follow? Yeah.
And also I think they're not very sensitive, because the awareness of that cord connection, if we're calling it a cord, what are we calling that?
It's an energy flow.
Yeah, that energy flow.
And it's really only a representation of an energy flow.
Yeah.
Like a representation of their desire type.
Yeah, that's why it's not very visible.
The soul has the desire, and the energy flows from the soul, but because the soul is in the physical dimensional space, that's the same space as the spirit body actually is, because it's based on the condition. So the soul is in the soul space, but its conditional space mirrors the conditional space of the spirit, right? So now we've got the soul is really enveloping my spirit body in my space, right? But when I say the soul, I'm talking about the whole soul is enveloping my spirit body and the spirit body of the other person, wherever they are, right? Because it can do that because it's in a different dimensional space. Right, but anyway, now we're getting complicated, and I understand.
We're in the soul.
Right, but these are all, and many of you who get interested in these subjects, honestly, it's a distraction from the reality of life. So I don't necessarily like sharing this kind of stuff with you in your current state, right? But we wanted to say that there is this sort of rose-coloured cord that you can follow and quite easily find who's at the other end.
I'm probably not going to do that. I was just curious about it. I really don't have that kind of desire. But
well, can I say, when you develop your soulmate desire, you will naturally follow that, even on Earth, without realising it.
Yeah, which is cool.
Which is cool.
Sorry for being in this. I apologize for this.
No, that's okay. But you will naturally follow it. So it's a very cool process. And in fact, God designed the process so that people would meet their soulmates on Earth. Because God wants you to be happy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
There's still a feeling that God doesn't want you to be happy. So.
I felt that He does today.
Well, part of our problem is a lack of faith that God wants us to be happy, isn't it? And so under those circumstances, we start creating addictions in order to be happy, creating our own happiness rather than relying on the way God wants us to be happy. So that's a problem we face in our soul that we need to address, Yeah. Right, we were over here somewhere. Oh, no, we're... Si, I think, was first, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So let's go, Si.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a mathematician who lived a long time ago,
Yeah.
100, 200 years ago. His name is Srinivas Ramanujan.
Yeah.
And other mathematicians used to be so frustrated how he came up with so many mathematical formulas that he would come up with, and the answer he would give is, I just get them.
Download them, yeah. From the Spirit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder if most of the innovations that happen on the earth, like Albert Einstein coming up with E is equal to square, and
Yes, but some of them were overcloaked completely, and some of them were just spirit mates who could share information with him. In the case of Albert, he had some spirit mates who inspired him to come up with thoughts. In the case with other ones, particularly ones relating to Eastern philosophies, who brought up in Eastern philosophies, a lot of times it's a complete overcloaking, where the mathematician in the spirit world says, I can overcloak this guy and I can pass down a whole lot of information through overcloaking this guy. However, there are some limitations spiritually that the law places upon them doing this. And this is why some things are not getting passed to earth. Now, there's certain things that will not be passed to earth and can never be until the condition of earth increases. And then there's other things that are far less impact and therefore can be passed. And those things are governed by God's laws, actually, as to which one can be passed given the condition, the global condition of earth. Yeah. But substantially, if you're a mathematician or you're a doctor or you're a scientist or you're a physicist or you're a chemist or you're even an engineer or even someone who just fabricates metalwork or whatever, and many times these people are, as you're doing your work, as you're doing your art, you are influenced by spirits around you in a certain direction because you're open to that kind of influence. So I find it quite amusing that all these scientists who believe there's no God and there's no spirit world are actually often getting influenced by the very thing they say there is none of. And it's quite amusing sometimes to observe, because you go, wow, that man there doesn't even believe in an afterlife or anything, and yet there's a spirit there influencing what, and you can observe it, you know, when you're a spirit, you can see the influences and observe the influences.
yeah, I think Elon Musk currently also says the same thing. I cannot stop it. I cannot.
Yeah, no, he's very influenced, man. Very influenced. Not very well influenced either. Yeah, very darkly influenced.
I have one more question,
Yeah.
probably a small one. When you call upon someone to show themselves to these spirits,
Yep.
is that like an instant communication to them, or how does that work?
Yep. Yep. The way it works is that I have a desire to help them, and I've got some spirit friends in the spirit world who organise the type of spirits that I'm desiring to help. And in this case, it's very easy to tell because, you know, obviously for the most part, it's going to be ones who are going through or have gone through the same experience, because they are going to have the most compassion for the experience of the people and also be able to give them the most help. So our spirit friends organise those people for me, and then when I say for them to appear, then they appear. Now, just one thing to bear in mind in all that, frequently they're already there, around the spirits already. And all I'm doing is asking them to show themselves. And the reason why they're already there is because they already feel drawn by God, actually, and by love. They feel drawn to help those kind of people who have experienced the same kind of heartaches that they personally have had. And so they're already there, but they don't, in this case of the group of spirits around Dijon, if they showed themselves, there would have been a whole heap of misinterpretations of what the spirits who Dijon and his group would have thought they were. And then when those spirits didn't give them the result that Dijon wanted, or the group of spirits with him wanted, in other words, arbitrating a connection with somebody on earth, and that's what they wanted, and these spirits wouldn't have done that for them, they would have been even more disappointed without knowing anything about, they wouldn't have asked the question about what to do about it or how to deal with that or anything like that. And so it would have been even potentially more dangerous to show themselves unless there's some person facilitating that process. But this is one of the benefits of Mary and I being on Earth, is that we can start to facilitate these processes where that in a more rapid way than would otherwise happen if it was just happening based on desire of the individuals. Right? Yep. And so we're, should we go right up the back and then there?
Yeah, so Justin, if you can just sort of stay with the mic, I know.
Sorry.
Same with Kim, yeah.
Oh, okay. So this goes back to like spirit overflow and with the exorcism and everything.
Yep.
Not to sound like harsh on spirits or anything like that, but aren't there better things to do in this world?
Well, in their mind, no, Jack. It's the sad thing is that many spirits are addicted to their belief systems. And they don't care whether they're true or false even half the time. They're just addicted to the belief system because the belief system gives them feelings that they feel they must have. Just like an addiction to a drug.
Yeah, it's sort of like, can you imagine a celestial spirit like looking down on the earth with a slightly different attitude, but saying something similar, like looking at all the humans, like looking at their phones and, going like, I don't know, to the rugby and eating fish and chips and like, they're like, isn't there better things to do? Like,
your life.
why are these guys just doing that? They don't do that, obviously.
Can you see that your judgment of what is better is based upon your preferences?
Yeah.
Like for some people, that's like the ideal thing to do, is to like meet all your addictions, if you like. And so it's not that dissimilar when you become a spirit. And often you've got more emotional charge to your addictions, and also a lot of
it's
times...
like we discussed yesterday, wasn't it? The addictions are so powerful and so emotional that you can't even hardly think about them. You just want them.
Yeah. And if you're really hesitant to enter the spirit life, then you can become, it's sort of like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you in your life where something really tough is happening, like say you've passed and you've got to enter the spirit world, but you're like, I don't really want to deal with any of this. I know I've got a great new cause. This is what I'm going to do. And it's a huge distraction from what you really need to deal with. So a lot of times spirits get into that trap as well.
They want distraction, they want addiction, they
feel like I'm righteously preserving the Catholic faith on earth, that kind of thing. And
you remember last week, what was the spirit's name? Who was the Christian man who lived a life? Andre, that's right. Remember, he'd been brought up to believe that he was doing God's will. So a lot of them also believe that they're doing God's will, or they're doing a universal favour for somebody as well, even though it's the false belief. A lot of them believe that too, that's their mission in life. And many of you even come to us sometimes saying, what is my mission? And we go, whoa, it's like, now you're going to wait for somebody else to tell you what your mission is? And then also, isn't it a bit strange to have a mission? No, you have a life. Not a mission. You have a life that you're going to choose to live, and hopefully that life is going to be forever expanding in its capacity and what you're going to experience, right? But not a mission that you're so focused on one thing that you do it at the expense of everything else. Yeah.
And the other thing is, Chang, is that a lot of spirits don't have any faith that there is anything better to do.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is similar to a lot of people on earth as well, isn't it? They're like,
Yeah.
well, there is nothing better than this. This is what I do, and so that's how these things end up happening.
You do what you see, and if you can't see, then you won't do.
Just like here.
Just like here, yeah. You do what you see. You do what's introduced to you. What you see and is what is attractive to you. So some of the things that are actually attractive to you guys, you haven't even seen yet. Right? Even on earth, you haven't even seen them yet, But also on top of that, from a spiritual perspective, when you enter the spirit world, you can't even see. Like you physically can't see things that you don't want to see. So if you don't want to see where you live, you won't see where you live. You'll be just in a place of dark place where you can't even see what the surroundings are.
This is why we try to educate you guys so much about the importance of connecting to your emotional will and your desires, because that will govern your whole future, whether you're on earth or in the spirit world. And in the spirit world, it's even more pronounced, you know. Like, part of Dan's problem was that he was so kind of engrossed in the idea that he wasn't in a life, you know, he was just waiting for the next life, that he'd hardly even examined the fact that he had a physical body, and yet he'd had it for 100 years. A spirit body, rather, but it's physical to him, you know. And this is, I talk to spirits like this all the time, where they're like, I didn't even see that thing. It's only when you point it out to them, and it's because their intention or their will or their desire is so much, well, beliefs are so much set that that thing isn't a possibility, or it doesn't exist, or
that it's not observable to them, and so therefore it doesn't exist to them.
Thank you.
Okay, we're in.
Calista?
Did your mother Mary show herself in Africa in the 80s? Because some people say that she
what was the
My
result?
mother Mary has not shown herself on earth since she passed.
But can you sort of see why a spirit might have appeared to try to appear as Mary on the earth?
Yeah.
Can you see why that
time.
would happen? What was the effect of it happening?
I have heard stories that she came to warn people against the Rwanda genocide that happened in the 90s.
Yeah. There were certainly spirits who came to warn people about the potential of what was going to occur. Certainly.
Spirits who were well-meaning, you know.
Yeah, but a lot of times it's the interpretation of the people on earth as to whether the identity of them, you know. And so if they appear, so let's say I have a feeling inside of myself or a concept of what my mother looked like, you know. So I'm talking specifically about my mother Mary, not Mary, not my wife Mary Magdalene, but my mother Mary. If I have a concept in me of that person, and a person similar to that appears to me, can you see I'm probably going to interpret that it was that person, even if it wasn't. Yeah. So as a lot of my friends from the first century have never appeared on earth since passing on earth, and I've only ever done it once myself, which was as soon as I passed.
Thank you.
So as soon as I passed in the first century, I did appear to people for the next nearly 40 days on earth. And I also went to the spirit world and did other things in the spirit world. I also went through all the hells as well, talking to people about the truth in the hells. So I did a lot of other things at the same time, but I also did appear to people on earth. But most of the people who followed me to the spirit world after I passed that we knew on earth didn't do that. Yeah. They knew that it would be misinterpreted, and so they didn't do it. Yeah. Because for me, I knew that all those people wouldn't have misinterpreted, and that's one reason why I did it. And also I wanted to reassure my soulmate first. She was the first person I appeared to, and then I appeared to others. Yeah. Okay,
why don't we start at the back, because we're at the back.
We're at the back with the mic, yeah. So
Justin?
right.
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, sorry.
I have two questions. The first is a little bit about the channeling yesterday and the comment you made today about being educated by God. And also you mentioned, or you and the spirit yesterday kind of discussed how they can't receive thought packages. So your education...
From God.
From God, that's what I meant, yeah, sorry.
They can receive them from people.
Yes, but not from God. So when you're desiring an education from God, it's emotional and sensitive?
Yes, emotional package.
And that's able to cover everything?
Yes, there's a lot of thoughts attached to the emotional package, yeah.
Well, and the truth is emotional in the end.
That's right.
Your soul registers or imbibes and holds truth emotionally.
Yeah.
So
the brain of your soul is the emotions of your soul.
Yeah. So any knowledge of truth that's in your soul is emotionally there. So you can see why it's economical for God to communicate with you emotionally about these things.
Also, thoughts don't exit the universe, but emotions can. So that God designed human emotions to be able to exit the universe so that God could feel them.
Which is also cool.
Which is really cool. And he didn't design thoughts to exit the universe. So that's why any thought you have that's a prayer will not reach God. Because it physically can't reach God. God knows what your thoughts are, he can read them. But the thoughts don't reach God in the sense that actually enter God's mind. Because the mind of God is his emotions too. Obviously we were created in God's image. And that's why it works the way it does. Yeah.
One more question. I've had some people that I believe have passed come to me right before I'm going to bed.
Yep.
And they've been distressed at times.
Yep.
And I feel like because I've seen you channel, the best thing I could say was for them to ask for help.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if that's a good way
Yeah,
to
it's really good if you can remind them, ask for help, somebody will come and help you. Right? So it's better than saying that than saying, oh, look for the light, because a lot of them don't have any light around them at all. So it's better to say, look, if you ask for help and you're sincere in asking for help, somebody will come to help you. And you can even ask God to send somebody to help them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you pray for them, that's going to, be really helpful too. And your love for them. See, oftentimes when spirits come to people and they're distressed or whatever, the feeling you have is fear, not love. But the more you can work through your own fears and have love for the people who come to you, they will be assisted by that love as well.
Yeah.
Obviously they're coming to you for a reason, and it might not be for you to help them, it might be because they have similar feelings to you, it might be for they might think you can help them. There's lots of reasons why spirits might come to you. That's another good thing to pray about. Why are they coming
to you? What was it? Just because they thought that they could get some help through you? Was it because you have a feeling that's more loving than the average person, or was it because you had a feeling to meet an addiction that you wanted to meet and they come to help you with that? So yeah.
It'll help your little boy sleep through the night.
Yes. Because of the fear, right? Yeah. So pass it down on the way down now. We're not back on the way down. And over here we're...
Does anyone have their hand up over here?
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question, but I know you wanted to end at 3. Is it okay to keep asking you questions then?
Sorry, what's the...
We wanted to end at 3, but we're going to go till 4.
We're going to 4, sorry. Those of you who need to leave for your bookings or whatever, then we're happy for you to take them. Yep.
I guess in yesterday's channeling, when Coral was here, she was motivated quite a bit by pain. Right? And pain was what asked her to got the desire going, to seek help. Today when Jean came, it was motivated more by boredom
which is a pain in itself, isn't it?
So I guess that was my question.
Yeah.
Does pain manifest itself in different ways?
Correct. You have different types of pain. Yes. So not all pain is just physical pain. Obviously, Coral was in a lot of physical pain, but in the case of Dejan, it is more in an emotional pain, like an emotional pain of this is just never ending, nothing, bored, never ending boredom.
Very pain in that way.
Yeah.
And somewhere in that group, there's definitely some of your ancestors, because that's sort of what got them to be engaged.
A week ago.
Yeah.
So many of you came a week ago. There was quite a number of ex-Hindus, you could say, or you're from the Indian culture or philosophies of life too. And many of you brought those spirits with you, and they go, "Oh, you're going to a spiritual thing. You're curious, maybe we can learn something there," and off they go. Yeah.
It's more like it's because they weren't very engaged with their will. It's not sort of how we would think of it, where they're like, "Oh, I'm quite interested in this. I'll pop along to this." But it's more like there's some pull because there's still some connection with their descendants
on Earth.
Yeah. And so there's just like a faint tug, which is enough for them to start to bring their attention to what's happening, which is enough for them to sort of suddenly start to go, oh, hang on, something's different.
And then when we talk about reincarnation, they're like,
Well,
okay,
what's
happening?
This is
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what we've been waiting to reincarnate 100 years. We need to know. Like,
Yes.
straight away.
Yes.
That's
and
like,
now
whoa.
now there's a more apparent desire to sort of seek something. You know?
I guess just to make sure I follow, also, where are they? Like, are they earthbound? Are they in solid?
No, they're in the hells.
They're in the first sphere.
In the first sphere, yeah. They were observing things on Earth, and they were interested in what's happening on Earth because they were feeling they were going to have to go back to Earth at some point. So they're interested in what's happening on Earth, but they weren't at the point yet where they were willing to overcloak somebody and actually live on Earth either. So they were just sort of in a waiting place in the first sphere, sort of just under the middle of the first sphere. Not in a place of where evil spirits go, what you classify as evil, purposefully evil, but not in a good place or not in a bright place either. It was very dark. As I said, they couldn't see their surroundings even. They didn't even know they were living in a land, and they were living in a land. There was the picture they gave Mary was like you could think of it as a desert wasteland, similar to some of the desert out here off of San Diego, over the other side a bit towards Arizona. A few rocks here, a few little hills here and there, but not very interesting, but also very stark. All of the vegetation was brown, none of it was green, but also it was all just very dark. Not a lot of light until the spirits who asked them to show the light, where they could actually see. And basically, when the spirits do that, it's like a torch. But if you can imagine, it's like a torch, a big torch, where you can see, when one of the bright spirits come and just say, and brighten up, the whole area for like kilometres around gets lit. And so now they can see it. That makes sense?
Makes sense. One of the things that helped in this channeling was a few objects, like the picture, the mirror.
Yes.
If the spirits had chosen on their own, could they have found objects around them?
Yes, they could have. In fact, their desire would manufacture the object. Yeah, but they didn't have a desire to look. And they never even thought of it, actually. Didn't ever have a desire to look at themselves because they thought that they were actually in a different body than the body they grew up in. And they believed that they were just in a waiting temporary place. And so they were just sort of going, well, even if I look at this body, it's not going to look the same as me anyway. It's just a temporary body until I'm waiting for the real one, which is on Earth, So when they saw the mirror, that they actually looked like how they looked on Earth when they were there, that was a big shock for many of them too, because they thought that wouldn't be the case, because they thought that old body is gone. They've been taught that it's gone, that it's died, and in the case of many of these faiths, they believe in burning the body and things like that, so they know it's gone at the time of death. And yet here they are with the same body. A bit of a shock. You sort of same looking body, and you go, but I thought it was burnt, and what? What's going on here? So yeah, there's a lot of confusion because of false beliefs. There's a lot of confusion about the state you're in. Yeah, it's sad, eh? It's sad.
Yes.
Yeah, it's sad. The amount of false beliefs on Earth and what they create for people passing is just incredibly sad, and incredibly sad too because people, they spend hundreds of years in these states, like some thousands of years in the state. And you sort of go, wow, that's so sad that they're just sort of waiting for that amount of time. Imagine if you had any will at all, you'd probably be bored out of your brain. But because they were taught to suppress their will, they don't even think. They just think, oh, I've got to obey the law. They were taught about laws, the law of karma. What's the other one that with karma and
compensation?
No, there's another Indian philosophy. Hindu philosophy, karma, and there's the other one, Dharma, yeah. And they taught these philosophies, and they believe that these are real. And so in the process, when they're in the place in the spirit world, they think that's what they're now living. These processes and waiting for karma to be exercised by visiting the earth again and going through the process. And it's sad because you end up, your beliefs end up determining your reality. Even when there's things that are real, that are really real out there, but you've created a belief system that makes you think that's real. So an example of that is on earth, you are all living in the reality that the US dollar is worth something. Aren't you? Right now, yeah. You think it's worth $1 US. It's actually just a piece of plastic that's been manufactured by, and it's not worth anything at all, hardly, right? In terms of the scheme of things, from God's perspective, it's not worth hardly anything at all except for what it can buy, right? But the average person on earth just believes it. And so if we all believe it together, we create an alternate reality. Yeah? And that's functionally what happens in the spirit world. Is exactly the same.
Yeah. One very important quality to develop on earth is a seeking heart for truth, an understanding that there's always more truth to gain and to be open and seeking of it, because that is going to serve you so well in your spirit life, because
forever.
You'll always be thinking, I can discover more, and if you have that philosophy, then you're not going to get stuck or stagnant.
Yeah, that's great.
I have a question about the soul.
The soul?
The soul.
Yeah.
And how it works with entering, like God's love entering the soul.
Yes.
If one
Can
part.
you just put the mic on your chin?
Yeah, that's it. Nice.
If one part desires God's love.
So one half of the soul desires. So you're saying you've got a whole soul, and let's say your attraction is male, right? Yeah. I've got to stop doing that. But anyway. So you're female, this is male, and your attraction is male. So this is your soul, right? And you're saying if you, one half, starts longing for love.
Right.
So you start, here's God, and you start directing your intention towards receiving God's love. Yes?
Not to scale, we have to say.
Not to scale, obviously. God's like infinite, so I've got to shrink it down a bit, right?
So if that part, I would receive God's love, would only that part actually, would the whole soul now, would the container of the whole soul now have God's love in it, or just one part?
Yeah. The whole soul will have God's love, but see how much you then feel emotion for the other half of you will depend how much the other half of you actually gets of what you've received. And also how much they want to receive from you will determine how much they can receive. So you've got to remember that everything is feeling here, right? So if this half is saying, I don't want love in my life, I'm not a romantic man, you know, I believe in science or whatever, and that's my interest in science and video games, that's my interest. And, you know, every time I tried love, it was just terrible, you know, it always worked out bad, so now I'm not that interested. I'm interested in sex, but not in love very much, right? So this is, if that's his state, let's say, and your state is you've received some love from God, and you have a longing for him, an unfortunate problem now is he is preventing those feelings that you have from entering him. Does that make sense? So they can't enter him. And anything you've received from God now also can't be cycled to him, because he's preventing that from happening. Now, of course, if you don't have a longing either, then you're preventing it from happening. So there's some people who long for love from God but don't think to long for their other half. Right? For lots of reasons. And we find it quite strange, Mary and I, but because it's something that we've longed for pretty much even before we met each other in the first place. But it is quite strange that this is how, for some people, how it is. And as a result, you can even receive love from God and even not have a desire to know the other half sometimes. Of course, that changes the closer you get to God. So when you get to the seventh sphere and the celestial sphere, the first one, you'll find that your longing for the other half is quite strong by that stage. And you'll start, you know, realizing the necessity of you coming to understand, meet and understand, and therefore join with the other half.
And last question, so if the male part doesn't desire love or...
From his other half, yes.
Does me receiving God's love...
You need to be closer with the mic so I can hear.
Receiving God's love still kind of affects the person or it makes them change their beliefs?
Well, it can have the effect depending on how much openness they have in other areas towards this half of the soul. So let's say both of you, let's say, have a certain personality, right? You have a personality signature. Let's say you're engaging that personality. And let's say he's not opposed to that personality either, right? He's not had an upbringing where he's been opposed to the personality emotionally. So he starts engaging the personality. So now there is some energy flowing between the two halves, even though they may not be aware. Right? This was happening between myself and Mary in this life. Like Mary had a longing for truth before I met her, and I also had a longing for truth. Now there's an opening between the two halves. Sooner or later, if I engage more truth and I engage more awareness of following that truth, sooner or later that will pull Mary into my life, because there is some now relationship between the two halves going on. It's not very well defined at that point, but there is a relationship. Yeah.
Can we say though that the way that God has designed things, when you separate, the soul has a will, but it's like you each
need to learn how to use it.
Yeah, and so the will is expressed separately. So my will and the way, it's not my will.
At the beginning.
This is what I'm saying, yeah. When we incarnate, it's like I have my will and Jesus has his will. And the only way we become unified is when that will is expressed in
the same way.
The same way. So if I receive God's love and Jesus doesn't, he can't receive that love from me, and he can't benefit from it, except in the way that we might relate to each other. And
through other things. Personality.
But I can't transfer God's love to him. And so it's not necessarily going to...
When you say you can't transfer it won't flow to me because I'm locked to it anyway. Yes. It can only flow to me if I wasn't locked to it.
So when we reach the union state, there's no blockages in between us in terms of the use of will and in terms of condition, and now the experience of both halves is shared. But until that point...
It's one experience actually, isn't it?
That's right. It's becomes one and it's flowing.
Yeah.
But before that point, it's like you have your own will, you have your own experience, and you have your own reception of God's love. It does benefit the soul ultimately, but it's not like if I receive love, I can't sort of... Jesus in his first incarnation in this non-unified state, he can't receive that love or really benefit from it.
Well,
except
there are
in the
some
way
provisos there.
I love him. Yeah.
There are some provisos. Let's say my parents were celestial spirits on earth.
Of course, yeah.
Then of course my soul is completely open to receiving God's love, even though I may not have yet exercised the desire to do so. If Mary exercises the desire to do so, I will feel it. Because I have no blockages to the reception of God's love. So there are some...
It's highly technical though, isn't it?
Yeah, there are some technical provisos. In practice, the average person is living a very singular life. And so is their soulmate, living a very singular life. And because of that, often those lives, and because of the taints of the parent sin, which is often very different for each half, then what will happen is we will act like we're separate individuals.
We really experience life as if we are.
As if we're separate individuals. So one of us starts receiving divine love, the other one is not having it cycle to their part of the soul, if you could call it that way. Their perception of the soul, because they're not allowing it. They can't, until they consciously allow it, they're not going to allow it. Once you start consciously allowing it, then certainly it can have an effect. So if Mary starts consciously allowing what I feel to enter her, now what I feel about other things are going to also enter her. Does that make sense? But the average person on earth is freaked out to the max about that. Like, when I say freaked out to the max, the average person goes, but now who am I? Am I having their experience or my experience? And the average person gets pretty panicked about all that. And the reason, and the panic causes the separation. Right? So are not by yourself a self-determining being. You and your soulmate together are a self-determining being. And most of you got to get used to this concept, and many of you are way away from this concept, by the way, emotionally. That you and your soulmate are eventually one being, and therefore you are already one being that just doesn't know they are. Does that make sense? And you don't know you are at so many levels. There's emotional levels where you don't even want to be, joined with each other for lots of reasons. And there are so many reasons. In fact, we could speak for weeks on the matter and you still wouldn't understand all the potential reasons as to why you and your soulmate are not feeling each other. And this is why it took Mary and I 1933 years to reach the union state. We had to work it all out. We were the first ones from this earth who worked it out. Right? So it took us all that time to work it out, to work out all the things we needed to learn to enter that state. And until we entered that state, coming back to earth and reconnecting with some bodies on earth to be here again wasn't possible. Right? And for quite a large amount of that time, we didn't even think it was going to be possible, actually. We didn't even contemplate that it would be possible, actually. Right? But as time went on, we started realizing, what if this is possible? That's possible. And it's interesting when you start doing what ifs, because you can go, what if that's possible? What if this is possible? What if that's possible? Maybe we should try, is the next sort of thought after that. And then once you start trying and you start realizing, maybe this is really possible. And then, of course, you get a lot of feelings from God about the potential possibilities. And you're in the process of discovering how to do it while it's happening. And so you end up in this place where what you thought might be possible becomes an actual reality. Okay? And when it comes to joining with your soulmate, this is how it's going to be for many of you. Many of you at the moment have no emotional feeling that it's even possible. Right? And also no inclination to make it possible. Right? And these particular beliefs, remember we've been talking belief matters, these beliefs about your soul that you hold on to causes it to mean that it's not going to be possible for you while you hold on to these emotional beliefs. Right? And this is part of the education to understand, while I hold on to things, while I hold on to a corrupt faith about something where I don't think things are possible that are actually possible, then of course for me they are going to remain impossible. Right? And then of course you've got your beliefs, and then you've got your imagination. And God's always trying to inspire your imagination to see what might be potentially possible. Right? God's always trying to do that as well. And in doing that, God at times can inspire you to go, that's possible. And this is how Mary and I realised it was possible, because we used to spend, when I say used to, we still do, but we spend a lot of time together feeling about spiritual matters and feeling that this is possible. And once you get to the state where you feel something's possible, now you can experiment to find out whether it is possible or not. Does that make sense? So that's how we discovered most of the truth that I'm sharing with you. That's how I discovered most of it. By imagining, firstly, through often inspiration, that something was going to be possible. And then in the process discovered that truth. And the very first person who enters the state of living that truth now proves to everybody else that the possible is a reality. So as soon as we entered the state, any state that we've entered in the past, firstly me becoming a one with God, as soon as I entered that state, everyone around me started to see, it's possible. And if you can see something is possible that you didn't think was possible before, can you see that increases your faith that it will work? And then, of course, it's a matter of following the education you receive from the person who's done it to do it yourself. Now, that's where it gets pretty tricky, because the majority of you want some other way of doing it. So a lot of people in the spirit world are actually still searching for other ways to do it. So they know, like there's people in the sixth sphere who know that you can become a one with God, but they're still in the sixth sphere because they're looking for other ways to make it possible other than the way we're teaching it, that I taught them. And so that means, because there's only one way, and I keep saying this even in the spirit world, there is only one way to become at one with God. And that's because God's economical. He didn't need to design two ways. One way was enough to make it possible. And so this is the important thing to realise too, is that there is the one way, and at some point you're going to have to be educated about that one way. Right? Now, how humble you are will determine how quickly you will receive that education and apply it. For some of you, you might not apply it for 1,000 years. And for some of you, you might try to do it tomorrow. Right? It just depends on a lot of factors, but a lot of times too, it depends upon your humility and your desire for truth, and your desire to live a life of love. And there's a lot of factors, but most of it is driven by desire, as to how strongly you desire the thing. Make sense?
So, yeah, I think it's time.
Yeah. Okay. Where are we at? So, we're at, yeah, Jay. Yeah.
So on that note, what I originally wasn't going to ask this, but since you brought it up, I thought I should ask.
Yeah.
You use the word desire, which is another way for me to say longing. And what I have found is, as I've longed for God and longed for my soulmate, the longing has kept increasing. One has fueled the other in a way that has allowed me to grow my desire significantly. And so I think the yearning or the longing to meet and be with the other half has been a very big pivotal part of my longing for God as well.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, is that fair to say? Longing being one of the ways, practical ways that desire manifests?
Well, you're using the words correctly, yes. And the feelings are not matching your words, though. So, and this is a problem with using words, is that we can use a word, but the feelings have to match the word. So and what I mean by that is, God's not interested in how you define the word. He's interested in how it really is. So let's look at this longing process for your soulmate for a start. Let's look at that. What longings do you feel you've had, Vijaya?
Desire to know God.
Yes. Now,
So we're talking about God and soulmate here.
yeah, let's break it into two areas. So one area is God, and the other area is soulmate, right?
And your point is really, isn't it, that your longing for one has fueled your longing for the other?
It's actually allowed me to stay in the longing. What has happened is, I noticed that I still have a lot of hang-ups about being vulnerable over,
Are you with your soulmate?
Sorry?
Are you with your
No,
soulmate?
I'm not with my soulmate. I know who he is, and I have a relationship with him. It's not romantic, but
Are you sure you know who he is?
I am sure. Unless, I guess your question is saying I'm not sure. Okay.
Well.
So go where you were going to go, Jake. So
Yeah.
it's going to help, isn't it?
What are you looking for from your soulmate?
Nothing actually at this moment. Just to
Not
share myself.
true.
I mean, I went through the gamut.
Yeah.
What
When
was-
you
what
say you
was-
went through the
what
gamut,
was
you
part
haven't
of the
processed the gamut emotionally yet, so a lot of what you're saying is not true. Go on.
Because I must be so good. I must be doing such a good sell job on myself that
Well, sometimes you are, and
Yeah.
most people do.
Yes,
This is what
yes.
I'm pointing out.
Yes, that's right.
Important to point this out in both your relationship with God and with your soulmate. What is your motive for both relationships? And this is where it requires a lot of self-honesty, Vijay. It's like the average person doesn't understand their own motives very well at all. And particularly when it comes to relationships. So, and one of the main reasons why we don't see the interaction between what we classify as our longings, our passions, with our addictions. We interpret addictions as passions and longings, which are often not the case. Very frequently, right, they're not the case. Addictions are never longings. But the average person goes, well, I feel I really want this, I really long for this, is how the terminology they use. Not understanding that actually there's addictions that are causing you to feel that way rather than actual longings. Okay? So it's very important with both our relationships, because remember, these are soul relationships. These are the two primary soul relationships. This one is an actual internal soul relationship. It's not even really a relationship, actually. Technically, you are the other person already.
You're refilling your
So it's not even really a relationship, right? It's a design. You could say a design feature, as you could call it, right? So that and that, though, are both driven by a motive. Now, that motive can either be addictive in nature or a pure passion. Right? Frequently, though, we like to tell ourselves it's a pure passion when actually it's an addiction. And frequently, we want to choose, particularly when it comes to this person, who they are. Frequently, that is the case. So, what's our motive? So what I'm encouraging you to do is to analyse your motive to be with your soulmate. What's your motive? Can you feel your motives? This is a good question for everyone here. Those of you who believe you're longing for your soulmate.
Well, I went through the part about being lonely, about wanting a companion.
Okay, yep, so loneliness can be a motive, can it? Now that's quite obvious, isn't it? Yeah. Is that how I spell it? No. Loneliness, that is, isn't it? Is that better?
Yes.
Yes. So loneliness certainly is and you know that's an addiction, right?
Yeah.
That drives an addiction. So that's quite obvious.
Yes.
Isn't it, that that's an addiction, and so therefore not a longing.
Correct.
Right? And by the way, you can have that same feeling for God, can't you?
Yes.
But you don't want to be lonely anymore, and you just want, and so again, it would be an addiction you'd have with God as well. Yeah. Yep. Other one you mentioned?
Wanting love, wanting to be loved.
Wanting to be loved. Yeah. Be loved. Okay. Yeah, people say a lot, don't they, that love is either a necessity, or they say it's a, what's another word people use for it? Like it's a need, that everyone needs to be loved, right? And it's true that we've been designed to be very responsive and sensitive to love. That is very true. But there's a difference between neediness and longing. See, true love wants to give itself as a gift to the other, doesn't it? Rather than get something from the other. Yep. So to be loved is actually an addiction. To love another, well, that depends on what you're trying to achieve through that love as to whether it's an addiction or not. Right? So you can actually have a desire, like I could have a desire to love Mary and think I'm passionate about it, but actually it's because I want something I want in return from her. And I can also have a desire to love Mary that is based upon an addiction I have. Right? In terms of I'm addicted to even just pleasing a woman. And so I meet Mary and I think she's a lovely woman to please. And she'll accept me pleasing her. So that's what I do. So can you see that's also a tainted longing, isn't it? It's not a longing anymore, it's just an addiction. Yeah. Okay, so what we need to do is be very careful about a number of things. Now, you say you've met your soulmate. There's 3 or 4 things that could be happening here, isn't there? Firstly, you could have met your soulmate. Secondly, the person could be the person you idealise as your soulmate. Thirdly, the person could present themselves with emotional injuries that you like based on your addictions, and that's why you believe you're a soulmate. Fourthly, a group of spirits around you could have chosen him for you, which you're very prone to have happen for you in your past. And they could have chosen you for you based on what you idealise and also based on their selection. Now, any one of those things could be happening, and often even more things than that can be happening. You can even have spirits setting you up with somebody in order to attempt to, at some point in the future, have a sexual relationship with them. They can even change your feelings. In other words, they can even do things like this. If you have certain set of emotional sexual injuries, they can make you feel sexual feelings when you're in the presence of a person that they want you to be interested in. They can even do that if you have certain sexual feelings that are not healed. Right? So if you look at all the things that are possible, can you see you'd have to be very circumspect, depending on your condition. You'd have to be very circumspect about what's actually happening. Now, where do you assess your condition to be? Your spiritual condition?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but that's why your being here has been tremendous.
Yeah.
Just in the last 24 hours.
You've sort of had to reappraise?
A huge shift.
Yeah.
I can't even begin to tell you the level of shift that's happened inside.
Yeah.
It's like a fog lifted, and God is just so much more real than than last week, for instance.
So where do you reckon you are?
And soulmate wise also, obviously, I the one thing I do know is that
You're avoiding this question.
Sorry, what happened?
You're avoiding the question.
I've just asked you very...
So my soul condition, I'm not certain of where it is, but I have worked through a lot of addictions on this. I've listened to every one of these lectures carefully and what on notes with that.
Yeah, but you've forgotten what I said to you last week.
Yes, that's true.
I said you're very much in your mind still.
Yes.
Yeah. But go on.
Very much.
Go on.
Very
Where
much
do you
so.
think?
Very much so.
Yeah.
So from a soul condition perspective, obviously I feel like I have some clarity on certain issues.
Yes.
Particularly when it doesn't involve myself.
Still not answering my question.
I don't know.
You're giving me a
asking for a
background.
number. He's
I'm asking
asking
for
for a number.
what sphere you're in. What sphere do you believe you're in?
I thought at least out of the hells, like mid-first sphere.
Yeah. Now remember I said that most people don't meet their soulmate to the 5th sphere.
Yes, I've heard you say that many times, that you know who your soulmate is by the 5th sphere. So then I'm going, well, how come I know for sure when I'm clearly not there? And I've asked that question many times.
Yeah. So that's a valid question.
It's a good question.
But very, very important to ask. Yeah. Okay. Shall we ask our spirit friends where you are? They don't like doing this, by the way.
No, Mary doesn't like it either.
No, Mary doesn't like it either, so Mary's probably not going to channel it. But I'm okay with it. Well, I'm okay saying the truth is the best way to put it. The reason why it's very important for you to be accurate in self-assessment. Does that make sense? And there are many, many addictions you're yet to work through with the opposite gender and also with your own gender. You displayed some of them last week with Mary with the same gender, and then you also have displayed some with me in your questions through the last 2 weeks with the opposite gender. Many addictions still to work through. You're correct in saying that you're still in the first sphere. Now, bearing that in mind, and I've said that the average person won't meet their soulmate to the fifth sphere, or won't know who their soulmate is until the fifth sphere. What do you think you might need to learn about between now and that sphere condition? What might you need to learn?
About myself.
About yourself, yes, about yourself. This is very, very important. Very important. Remember, the soulmate attraction is based upon the personality of the individual, right? Not based upon what the individual believes their personality to be. You follow me, Jay? So what things do you think you would need to do to actually know who you are? Is the question I'm asking.
Follow my passions.
Okay, now let's look at that first. My passions. Do you believe you're following your passions now?
No, not all the way.
Okay, but you do believe you're following some of them, don't
Yes,
you?
I am.
Yeah. And how many of your things you think are passions are things you were taught to do in your childhood? So in other words, did you even have a passion to be a doctor?
No, not at all.
No. Interesting. And yet a lot of your life is actually surrounding that, shall we call it, job, surrounding that vocation. So interestingly enough, what caused you to want to be a doctor? Can you remember?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
A childhood boyfriend who wanted me to be a doctor. It was crazy, but true. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. No, that's not crazy. No.
People have pursued things in their
have
life
pursued things for far less reasons.
Yeah.
Trust me. So yeah, that's not crazy. That is true, right? So it was actually your desire to please a male that led you down that path. You follow me? And this now has become a large portion of your life. You think about percentage of time that you do it in terms of your life. How much percentage of time is that?
About 40%.
Yeah, so that's a large percentage of time, isn't it? 40% of your life is done pursuing a vocation that you were actually encouraged to have from a male. Do you follow me? So the man believed that's what you should do. And so you're dedicating 40% of your life to something, a man who's now not even in your life told you it was good for you. And he's not even in your life now. Yeah. And you're still doing it. You follow me? So now, that's a lot, isn't it? If you think about that, that's quite a lot.
Yeah. And a lot of your life would have been dedicated. There would have been times in your life where
100% almost.
of your time
You obviously had to go through the whole education process, which is very time consuming for a doctor. The whole process of training, very time consuming for a doctor. Did you do a residency or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Residency, fellowship.
Whoa, that's full-on time consuming for a doctor. So now it's 40%, but historically it was even far more, wasn't it? Yeah. And yet it was always suggested by a man. And you're not even sure whether that's a passion of yours.
Oh, it is a passion now, but when I went into it originally, it wasn't. I would not have dedicated it just for that sake.
Well, is it a passion connected to your personality, or is it a passion connected to your desire to please a man?
Passion connected to my personality. I genuinely like people.
You like people.
Yes, I don't disagree
That's not
with
being
that.
a doctor, though, is it? That's people.
There's a lot of ways you can like people.
I genuinely, in human body, the passion for the human body.
Yes, but I love the human body too, but I'm not a doctor.
The workings of the human body.
Yeah.
Physiology of
I mean, far more than my colleagues do, actually. I look at a lot of my colleagues.
Can you see what you do even in the conversation? There's a temptation, and this is why I'm bringing it up, Joe, and it's an illustration of all of you.
everyone has.
There's a temptation for you to justify to self every decision you've ever made. There's a reason why we do that, is because we don't want to feel any disappointment or sadness about the past decisions we've made. And so what we want to do is we want to reinforce the decisions to ourselves so that we can feel better about things, rather than avoid the pain of coming to know that it maybe not is even your passion at all. Do you follow? Now, this is just one area of your life. We haven't even talked about your personality yet. So what is your personality?
Definitely love music.
That's not personality. That's not personality.
I agree.
Love music is something you can develop. So that's not personality. Okay, let's put it over there.
I guess I'm assertive.
Assertive, let's put that over there. That's not a personality trait.
Now it's...
Well, this is what I'm saying, right? Remember, so what you're saying is that you told us there's no words to define my personality. That's what I'm saying. But you see, the average person doesn't think that either. They're thinking, no, my personality is I'm a strong person. I'm this person. I'm an assertive person. I love music. This is me. This is who I am. And I'm going, no. God designed every single one of her children to love music. Every single one of you, at some point in your future, is going to love it. Right? God designed every single one of her children to love art. Every single one of her children to love science. Every single one of her children to love chemistry. If God didn't design you that way, he would have designed you unequal. You understand? And he designed you equal with everyone else. And to do that, he had to design you with the potentialities and the capabilities that are the same as everyone else. But he didn't design the personality the same. Because equality is not determined by personality. Right? So he didn't design that the same. So I ask about personality, but persons, and this is something everybody does with me, right? They list all these different, things that they think are their personality, but actually they are character traits, things they developed. And for the most part, the average person has not even discovered their own personality. And usually the older they are, the worse it is, because the older you are, you've lived in a facade-based or a life that's been dictated by others to a large degree for a long period of time. And as a result of that, you've become more distant from personality over that period of time. So what you end up doing in that space is that you end up convincing yourself that the character traits are your personality. And so, this is the reason why it takes to the fifth sphere to find your soulmate. And the reason why is because most people have never engaged their personalities for their entire life on earth, ever. That, in fact, most people hate their own personality while they're on earth. Right? They haven't come to love it at all. Now, because of that, remember that the attraction between the two halves is fundamentally a personality attraction. Follow? Where we have the same personality at the soul level. But if I'm convinced that I love all these things, and Mary convinced that and when I met Mary in this life, she was convinced she loved a whole heap of other things that are different to the things that I love. And we're both totally convinced we love the things we love when we meet. You follow? Now, if it so happens that Mary loves the things I love when we first meet, well, that's a very amazing coincidence, isn't it? if you think about the billions of parents there could be on the planet, and the billions of experiences, that literally infinite experiences there could be, for us to have very much same personality is like, character even is even unusual. But let's say it happened. It still doesn't mean we have the same personality, right? And unless I have learnt how, and usually this is what I find with God, is that God teaches you how to understand yourself, your personality. Unless I've defined my personality and discover it, then and be it, I've got to be it too. That will enable the other half to recognise it when she sees me or he sees me, right? And look, and honestly, if you're the person doing it first, they will probably recognise you before you recognise them sometimes, like, because they're not doing it yet. And so it's hard. And unless you're really sensitive emotionally, you can't even feel what their personality is. All you see is their character, their character traits, and that's all you see. Unless you've developed yourself well and truly into the fifth sphere, you won't even be sensitive enough to notice the difference between a person's character and their personality. And the fact that I'm saying this to you and listening to these things is indication that you haven't done it yet. So if you haven't done it yet, how can you say definitively who your soulmate is? You can't. Now, spirits might tell you that this guy is. Some of those spirits might actually be right. You don't know at this stage. There's a strong feeling inside of you that he is. Isn't there? If we've got to be honest about that, there's a strong feeling inside. But that could be because you have very strong codependent addictions that match his addictions. That could be the strength, or it could be the spirit-involved strength. And until you know your personality properly, you will not be able to determine it. Now, that's soulmate. So I suggest to you that you give up the idea that you know who your soulmate is. And instead, find out who you are first. And live that person first. Now, God is going to help you do that, and this is the beauty of having the longing for God. As long as that longing is pure and sincere, and we were thinking next week actually that we might actually talk about what it means to be sincere. So that you can sort of grasp the full concept of what sincerity actually is at an emotional level. But unless your longing is pure and sincere, even the feelings you're feeling from God could also be from a spirit. Because the spirit says, I see you longing for God, but God's not giving you any feelings. But if I give you some feelings, then you'll feel encouraged to long for God more. Now, this is also very common. This happens all the time too. The measure of whether the longing for God is actually working is the change in your condition as others feel it, not as you feel it. The reason why it's not as you feel it is because initially you will probably not feel it. Right? The reason why it says others feel it is because initially you probably won't feel it, because you're insensitive when you begin, and therefore unable to feel oneself. And there may be other people you meet who are a bit more sensitive, and they see, oh, you've made some changes, and they feel you've made some changes, right? Eventually, the strength of it will be that you feel it. Right? In that process, he's also going to try to expose to you your personality. He's going to help you with that. In the process of helping you with that, you will come to understand your personality and eventually come to deal with all the reasons why you don't want to be that person. And one of them happens to be for you, Vijay, the man's influence to become a doctor is one of the reasons why you're not being the person God created you to be. At this stage, you don't understand how powerful that influence has been on your entire life, right? And all the different ways in which it's affected you, one way or the other. You don't understand the nuances of each way it's affected you at this point. You will come to discover it as you get closer to God, right? So we need to talk about pure and sincere desire. What I notice in you is you have a longing for truth, and you are brave. And when I say you're brave, you want to share the truth you discover with others. And you're not too afraid of doing that. The average person is very afraid of doing that. The average person hears the truth, and we were listening to, I think it was your experience, was it this today, Wendy's experience, about Baha'i faith, and you were in the Baha'i faith, and there was somebody else in the Baha'i faith, and you didn't even know she was like listening to divine truth.
Took her a lot of
to
tell you
courage to even build up the courage to tell it. That's not how it is for Vijay. Vijay, I hear it, I'm telling it. You know what I mean? That's one of your, you know, really it's a very good thing about your character. Because bravery is something you develop, right? Yeah, so it's a very good thing about your character. And as a result, these two things are leading you to more truth and leading you to more experiences, which are very good, right? But there is one major Achilles heel Vijaya has, and you know what it is. It's your
humility. My intellect, yes. Oh boy, yes. I started in medicine at 16, and
yeah.
Oh my God, it's
yeah. That head is really working hard, right?
It's really trying to get out of this.
Yeah, you are very intellectually dominant to the point of suppressing quite fundamental emotions. Dominant, very intellectually dominant, and that is going to be something. At the moment, you're using your intellect to determine a lot of things, right? And you can see why, because you've had a history of using it all the time for everything. Every decision in your life, every choice you've made, all your work day is engaged with this, what's become a very powerful intellect, to the detriment of your feelings. Make sense? To the detriment of your feelings. And until that changes, you're going to try to use your intellect to solve every problem, even the problems with connecting to God. And that's the thing you're going to have to address in your life, right? You address that one thing, which is going to be tough, by the way. It's not going to be as easy as anything else you've addressed, actually, up until this point, right? And the reason why is because it's become so dominant, because you've used it all your life and you actually love it. And there is a strong feeling in you that it calms everything else down. Your intellect is you could say, a support for you. You see it as a support for you. Very hard when you're in that place to allow the emotional dominance. Very hard. So it's going to be a difficult process. And that will change how much of God's love you can receive by a long way, and also will help you discover your personality. And the reason why I've suggested those things to you is because these things many of people need to do. And can I also say, many of you men in particular are also intellectually dominant. Right? Now, Vijaya has had a leaning towards a male's way of doing things for a long time. You know that, right?
Yeah.
You almost look up to the male way of doing things. And you almost see the female way of doing things as actually a weakness almost, sometimes. And this is something that's going to have to change, because you've disconnected yourself from what I would classify as strong, feminine qualities that have been suppressed throughout your life. Yeah? if you are not the feminine expression of your soul in its pure state, can you see it's going to be very hard to attract your soulmate. So one of the beauties of being feminine, masculine, is that I can be the masculine expression of our soul. Mary, in her form, is the feminine expression of our soul. And I will be ultra attracted to the feminine expression of our soul. And Mary will be ultra attracted eventually to the masculine expression of our soul. Oftentimes Mary's been attracted even, and then she didn't want to be, but she is. Does that make sense? So once you allow these things happen, it's sort of like, this is what happens. Now, if you follow the path of what I've just said, then eventually you will know who your soulmate is, but I would not at any point of time before then try to convince yourself that it's someone other than you don't know. You follow?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. Because what you're doing when you convince yourself you do know when you're in the first sphere, you're not doing this personal work to understand and grow your own personality to know, and you're going to be very, very tempted to constrain your personality to meet the goal of that person.
I actually noticed that already happening. So
yeah, this is why I raised it, right?
Yeah. No, that's not right.
Yeah, not right. And what that does is, see, if you are your true personality, he won't be able to help himself, right? But if you manufacture one to suit him as he is now, because you believe he is, can you see that can be largely to the detriment of both of you, whether you're soulmates or not.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's quite dangerous to do what you're doing for your soul. Make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask on the channeling yesterday. There was a lot of people in pain yesterday.
Yes.
And the pain was very severe. I went home with a lot of pain.
Yes.
And I felt there must be a lot of Hindu spirits who were around, who were part of getting that realization. And,
yes, but the group that we channeled didn't contain many Hindu spirits, so a lot of these are with you. Yeah, but what we said to this group of spirits do apply to those too.
Yeah, today sure, but yesterday also I felt a pain, a lot of pain. Today definitely I had trouble staying awake, which I never have in withdrawals.
Yeah.
So I felt a lot of, and that was interesting because reincarnation was never a belief that I even entertained, even when I lived in India. So I don't have any personal relationship to that belief, but clearly I may have ancestral spirits who
who do put a lot of pressure on you.
Yes.
And they and anybody who's lived in India would know that ancestral spirits are honoured, and they also generally put a lot of pressure. And also, even the family alive, who's alive, also, as you know, puts a lot of pressure. That they, and of course, when they pass, they continue with that pressure, and it's huge. Like, and oftentimes, the kinds of pressure many people in the US experience are more to do with their addictions, right? But in countries like India, a lot of the pressure is more to do with family addictions, than other spirit addictions. Yeah. Yes, you do have these spirits with you, and yes, there are certain emotions you have which you haven't dealt with yet that cause the attraction and also cause the suppression of self. The key is to work through those things, and then those feelings will be relieved. At the moment, you sort of treat it as if it's their problem, but it is there's certain emotions you have which are causing the problem for your own body when they come.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, guys, it's the end of the day, so sorry I can't keep answering your questions. Of course, when it comes to the human soul, we could be answering questions until for a long time. It took me 1933 years. It took us 1933 years to discover a lot of these things about the soul. So you can imagine that we could probably discuss it for 1930 years. Of course, for the first people doing it, it's a lot longer because you've got to go through and discover the experience and work out how to go through it and have the experiments. When you're being taught something, it opens your mind to, and also your feelings to things that help you realise things in advance of your condition, which is very helpful.
And our ultimate goal in holding these events is not to teach you every single thing that we know, but rather teach you enough that you will start to engage experiments in your own life and learn these things from God and through your own experiences. That's far more meaningful than listening to us.
Yes. So Mary and I have enjoyed your company for 3 days, particularly today, guys. You're a bit more engaged today in general, yes? Can you feel that attitude, sort of more open spirit? That's the kind of childlike spirit you're looking for? You know, that's more open to receiving truth. So that's the kind of spirit you want to have for the rest of your existence, really. Yeah. You going to say?
I was just going to say it's been our pleasure to meet lots of you for the first time.
Yeah, we haven't. We like to meet new faces and put personalities to those faces. To fill your personalities. Developed or undeveloped, doesn't really matter. Yeah. Now, I think some of you are coming next week, is that right? Can you put up here some of you?
So we'll see, then we don't have to say bye.
We won't say bye to you. The other people who are not coming next week, who are you? We say bye to you. Very nice to meet you, and good that we could catch up with each other and share these truths with you, right? Mary and I would like to thank you for your donations, and also we want to say just briefly that we are returning next year. We feel we will be returning next year, given whatever we need to organise. At this stage, we're not sure whether it will be San Diego as well as North Carolina, but at this stage, we're definitely going to North Carolina, and we may come past here. It might not be San Diego, but rather LA, on the way home. And so we might have a week or so on the way home where we just pop in here and do an event here.
If we were to do an event here, how many of you would travel to North Carolina, just out of interest?
Yeah, so a fair portion? Okay. Yeah. And so we'll just see how that goes. A lot of it depends on our energy levels, to be honest. And having a long trip like we've had is quite taxing, particularly when there's no rest in between and so forth. Yeah. But that's our plans, and we're hoping to do that. We're thinking USA is probably going to be sometime in September. Yeah.
And that website that I gave you this morning, event.divinetruth.com, it will all be on there. Yeah. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for showing up after registering.
Yes.
That brings me a lot of happiness. Safe travels to wherever you're going now.
Yeah.
Home.
Now, after this group finishes, Mary and I do need to pack up everything because we have to unpack the event tonight, and we're repacking it up ready for on Friday next to get it all set up again. And so Mary and I won't have any time to spend with you after this event, and both of us are busting to go to the toilet, so we also need to do that. But we want you to look after yourselves on your travel home, and we hope to see you guys again at some point in the future, particularly next year. And we hope that face-to-face meeting has benefited you. It's a lot different than watching a video, isn't it?
Yes.